Dream, 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 dream when I
Something evil watching over me, and I'm afraid this ain't no fantasy. It's a nightmare. It's just a dream. No, it's a nightmare.
Hello, listeners past, present, and future. This is Haddonfield Radio. As always, here at Haddonfield Radio, we bring you the history, legacy, and lore of movies, trailers, and more. For this special episode, we are broadcasting live from a very steamy, very dreamy Springwood boiler room. And while this is our 14th episode, this episode also represents the beginning of Haddonfield Radio Season 2, where we will be taking you through a fan commentary deep dive exploration of every single film in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, featuring everybody's favorite, magnificently murderous dream demon, Freddy Krueger. We are your hosts. I'm Christian White.
And I'm Joe Francazio.
And the incredible story of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise's amazing ascent into the annals of horror history doesn't begin on a Hollywood soundstage, nor does it begin in the trunk of New Line Cinema founder Robert Shaye's car, nor does it even actually begin in the mind of the soft-spoken, erudite, and highly intellectual writer-director Wes Craven. The Nightmare on Elm Street story actually begins in the mid-1970s, in, of all places, the Southeast Asian country of Cambodia. Between 1975 and 1979, the Communist Party General Secretary and de facto leader of Cambodia, Pol Pot, along with his feared and savage regime, the Khmer Rouge, began an infamous campaign of outright human genocide against scores of Cambodian intellectuals, cultural dissidents, and ethnic minorities that ultimately resulted in the catastrophic wholesale murder of nearly 2 million human beings, which quite literally represented 1/4 of the entire population of the country of Cambodia at that time in history. While millions of innocent Cambodian people were systematically butchered, thousands upon thousands more sacrificed everything they ever knew by escaping one of the most horrific examples of relentless mass murder in human history. Many made exodus to relative safety and stability in countries like Thailand and neighboring Vietnam, and countless more made their way to the tolerant and welcoming shores of the United States, and to a lifestyle completely alien to their own. Even though these brave souls miraculously escaped the unspeakable barbarism of Pol Pot's regime, none were spared the horrendous and lifelong psychological scars and traumas that endlessly plagued both their waking lives and their dreams. Many of these Cambodian refugees came to quite literally fear sleep itself, due to the abject horrors seared forever into their souls, psyches, and dreams. One afternoon in the ensuing years after the devastation of the Cambodian genocide, up-and-coming writer and director Wes Craven, whose films Last House on the Left and The Hills Have Eyes had both been counted amongst the most unnerving and transgressive horror films of recent memory, picked up the daily edition of the LA Times and found himself immediately immersed in the first of what would become a series of articles exposing a mysterious string of sudden, unexplainable deaths involving Cambodian and Hmong refugees, almost all universally young, healthy males in their 20s and 30s who reportedly died during intense and inescapable nightmares. These men had all been quite literally scared to death while asleep and while dreaming. Even more frightening still was that this was not an isolated event. It was becoming an epidemic. Wes Craven couldn't shake this article from his consciousness. Its universality at once both fascinated and unnerved him. He knew intrinsically that there was something uniquely unsettling about the vulnerability of sleep, and reading the LA Times expose also provoked Craven to think back on the fears of his own childhood, growing up in an urban section of Cleveland, Ohio, as part of a strict Baptist family. As a child, Wes Craven very much feared the dark, and more so, his shadowy bedroom window that faced the city alleyways behind his home, that were well traveled by denizens of the city's vice-ridden nightlife. One late night, after the nearby bars had emptied, Craven heard a strange sound emanating from outside his window, and steeled his bravery enough to crawl over and carefully peer out. There stood a man shrouded in darkness, in a trench coat and greasy fedora. As the shadowy figure drunkenly finished relieving himself against the wall, he zipped up and suddenly stared up directly at young Wes Craven with menacing eyes and a miscreant laugh. The man took malevolent pleasure from frightening a child, and that was something that Craven never forgot. Years earlier, in 1967, 27-year-old upstart entrepreneur Robert Shea had taken everything he had and started his own film distribution company that he proudly called New Line Cinema. Shea, born into a hard-working Jewish family of Russian immigrants in Detroit, Michigan, would personally drive the heavy reels of films like Reefer Madness and John Waters' Pink Flamingos from city to city and town to town in the trunk of his own car to art house theaters and midnight showings, trying to get enough money together to eventually produce a film of his own. In 1976, Shea had acquired enough capital to independently produce the Mark Lester film Stunts, which, while not the most memorable film, was a modest success for the burgeoning company, and led Robert Shea to shrewdly acquire the quietly lapsed rights to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which New Line Cinema then distributed widely to its most lucrative results yet. Meanwhile, Wes Craven had written an original horror screenplay that was centered around a child murderer named Fred Krueger in a town called Springwood, who is burned alive by a group of vigilante parents and who becomes an indefatigably evil entity who relentlessly stalks the dreams of the teenage children of the very same people who killed him. Craven imagined Krueger replete with a signature glove emboldened with sharpened steel talons that would strike terror in the hearts, minds, and nightmares of both his victims and the audience. However, after almost every single major studio failed to see the film's potential and passed, Robert Shea's New Line Cinema swooped in and successfully brokered a deal to produce and distribute Craven's film. That film, A Nightmare on Elm Street, produced for just over $1 million and released in November of 1984, would ultimately go on to become one of the most successful and iconic horror films in Hollywood history, and made Wes Craven, New Line Cinema, and of course, the bastard son of 100 maniacs himself, Freddy Krueger, into the stuff dreams are made of. Here we are, Joe, 14 episodes in.
Woo, count 'em, people.
Over a year of Haddonfield Radio, the start of Haddonfield Radio Season 2. And as always, I have to ask you, in a general sense, what do you think of both the 1984 film A Nightmare on Elm Street and the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise in total?
Oh, well, I mean, I love them. Of course, Halloween will always be my my number one.
Right,
Okay.
right. I
Obviously,
understand that.
You know, we based our show on that.
Yep,
but
of course.
as we continue, I mean, A Nightmare on Elm Street probably has to be my second, if not third, like most loved franchise. The first movie is great. It has what, you know, as a fan of filmmaking, it has that great classic story of a film that was hard to get made and ends up becoming, you know, a history-making film.
Like
you
an
know,
actual classic.
I mean, it's been added to the National Film Registry.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, and so. You know, I love that. I love those films that have that type of a story, that have filmmakers behind them, that have their own story to tell. You know what I mean? While you're kind of learning about this movie.
I honestly think if you were to ask 10 people randomly to name 3 horror films, I think A Nightmare on Elm Street would be one of the first ones they would name.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think especially for people our age, right, where we are the product of the 80s,
right,
you know?
Right.
So, of course, I mean, I feel like a lot of people that are in their probably late 30s to late 40s are going to have a strong love for those classic, you know, the Halloween, Texas Chainsaw, Nightmare on Elm Street.
The Friday the 13th.
Friday 13th.
Yep.
You know, those,
really,
you know,
like the Mount Rushmore of iconic horror characters.
I don't know if it's even cliche just to name them. It's like just saying I love classic rock and I like Led Zeppelin, you know, or the Beatles. But these are greats. They're greats. It's you can't deny it. You know, you can go and love the more hardcore stuff and all that, but I mean, somewhere there's got to be a love for this type of movie in a lot of horror fans.
Well,
you know?
Even outside of horror, and just in terms of iconic character creation, I mean, you don't get much better than Freddy.
Well, especially in this one, this is the darkest probably of all the movies until you get back to Wes's new Nightmare, where he tries to kind of bring it back to a dark place. But you know, this is where Freddy, you know, is very dark and you know, like Halloween, this movie was made with the intention of there not really being sequels. I know you can talk about the end of the movie. There was a little bit of an argument between Bob Shea and Wes over that. But from Wes's standpoint, as the writer-director, this was supposed to be a standalone. So with that in mind, and you think about Freddy from that standpoint, he's pretty creepy, evil, dark. The humor, even though there is humor, it's very different. He's like it's like they mixed the classic demented clown. You know what I mean? But with a universal monster.
It's interesting you say that because I have in my notes to bring up the fact that Freddy really is in many ways like the trickster god, almost like a Loki or a Hermes or the Egyptian Set.
Well, I mean,
he really embodies kind of like that deep, kind of symbolic feeling that doesn't surprise me, considering Wes Craven was such an intellectual and so educated.
Yeah.
I mean, this film has got a lot of allegorical depth. It's got a lot of subtextual depth, metaphorical depth, and it's interesting to me that like you look at like the Halloween franchise. The Halloween franchise, all 13 films, is kind of on. And I'm not saying this as a negative, but it's on sort of like a placid level across all 13 movies. Like Michael Myers is essentially Michael Myers across all 13 movies. Or 12 movies, you know, arguably.
Yeah.
But Freddy and the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise is really fascinating because of how it evolves over the franchise and becomes something completely different before it eventually kind of circles back around, like you were saying, back to where it started.
Yeah, and you know, a great thing that makes Freddy is that he could kill any of these people at any time. What makes him, or part of what makes him scary, is that he likes to mess with these people. You know, is that sadistic clown sort of element, you know?
Right.
He gets, it's in that story you were telling. Obviously, it all stems from when Wes was a kid, and he saw this man who found joy in freaking a little kid out in his window that night.
It's frightening.
So you're seeing, Freddy is really the worst of us. It's the guy who really truly enjoys scaring little kids.
But like all the greatest anti-hero characters, you can't help but love him.
Well, even though the parents are justified, supposedly.
Well, he's a child murderer.
They take, or there's the argument that they take the law into their own hands. Are they justified in that? But either way, they kind of, I don't know why, there's a slight sympathy string that I don't know, maybe it's just me that gets pulled because of the way they kind of just went and got Freddy and burned him alive. Kind of cornered him.
Well, I think a lot of that comes from Robert Englund's incredibly nuanced portrayal, starting even in this film, but certainly going forward. And as we cover it, we're going to be covering all the films featuring Freddy. So as we go forward, there's more of this. But Robert Englund brings something really deep to his interpretation of the character of Freddy Krueger. And I totally agree with you. I think there is a strange, uncomfortable, disturbing sort of sympathy that you do feel for someone who was a child murderer.
And Wes talks about how that is part of what led him to casting Robert, is that Robert really kind of understood that he had to kind of go and be comfortable with going to that place that people shouldn't go to, and it was all in the name of acting and to portray this character, but that it couldn't have felt fake, or it wouldn't have worked. That this had to be somebody that really understood. And then now, there's been a lot of stories from Wes's side on sort of where Freddy comes from both that man in the alley to the little kid who bullied him.
It was like a childhood bully named
It was the
Fred
kid
Krueger.
in the paper route with him who bullied him. Now, from Robert Englund's point of view, he's talked about how Freddy, when he was when Robert was in school, when he was a kid, there was a kid in his class who on Valentine's Day, literally this one boy got nothing. And that kid grew up to be Freddy.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's creepy.
Yeah, so and that's where really, that was Robert's motivation. Like in his head, that is kind of where the seed got planted in a human being to sort of start disassociating from children, and the idea of children should be nice and loved, and you know what I mean.
And continuing on with Robert Englund, I totally just lost my train of thought.
Well, so you want to keep going. When he also came into audition, there was the famous story that helped him get the role, was that he took oil literally from the dipstick of his car, greased up his hair. He took ash from an ashtray and rubbed it under his eyes.
Oh, for his audition.
And he tried to not blink. And he kind of just went in there and creeped them out.
Well, remembering what I was going to say and going along with that, you have to keep in mind in a contextual sense, at the time that Robert Englund was meeting with Wes Craven and Robert Shea and auditioning to play Freddy, what he was primarily well known for was playing the
Willie,
extremely sensitive and the most human of all the lizard alien characters from the very iconic TV series V.
Yeah.
That was really one of the most famous television series of the 80s.
It literally is, I think, still considered the most popular miniseries ever on TV.
And now, was it only a miniseries, or was it
That's
a TV
how it started.
series? Did it ever become a normal series?
It did. And it was kind of a little less renowned, but it's funny because in the interviews, from his point of view, he's on top of the world. Like, he's got this hit series. He's the comic relief. He's known, but it's the most known he has been in his life.
And even like other supporting character work, like in like the movie Alligator and other movies like that Robert Englund had appeared in, he usually played like yokels.
Even if you go
goofy nerds.
He was in all those 80s shows like Knight Rider and whatever.
I mean, look at him. You can't. He's not going to be a romantic leading man.
But then, to the filmmaker's point of view, he was still sort of an unknown. You know what I mean? In the film world,
because he was like a chameleon, like character actor.
Right. But I mean, let's face it. If he didn't get the role, who knows if the movie would have been a success? Wes was initially looking to cast an older person when he was, thinking so much about that man he saw in the alley as a kid.
Right.
And something I brought up to you earlier, and you said to make sure I mention, is there has been a lot of stories I've seen on the internet and even some photos associated with the casting of David
Warner from Time Bandits and many other things.
Titanic I mean just so much stuff, right?
What Joe's about to talk about, this absolutely blew my hat off.
But it has recently been confirmed that that did not happen.
So the pictures that you can find online of David Warner in the supposed Freddy makeup.
It's just Freddy makeup associated with, and they say it's him, but if you really look, there's nothing that.
So that's not David Warner.
No, he confirmed, and other filmmakers involved in Nightmare have confirmed that never got to that point. Maybe they talked to him, but he was never cast. He never did makeup. And if you think about it, in the way Robert was cast, and the way he came in under the guise that they couldn't find anybody, right? It was really kind of getting to the last minute. It makes sense that they would have had this whole other guy who backed out because of scheduling things, and then they would have gone 360 and gone with the young guy known for comedic. You know what I mean? It really,
not to mention,
if you think about it, but like all great movies, there are these stories that you have to kind of
parse through.
And sometimes you got to follow the thread.
That's a huge one, though.
Well,
I mean, that's like an iconic part of the accepted lore.
And I was ready to go with it, and then what happened was, because I'd only seen the name rang a bell, and I couldn't picture the guy, so I started looking him up. And then I started looking up his name and Nightmare on Elm Street. And I saw a lot of the story that goes around in the photos. But then if you kept digging, and I saw this one story that said, he actually didn't. And then I started researching just that idea.
Oh, Jesus.
And then you just see, there was a few articles that say,
it's a bombshell.
Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to say, I'm sort of just now delving into it.
What you're suggesting is based on your deeper research.
The research I just did, and it's, 2023, and this is
because that photo of supposedly of David Warner in the makeup is one of the most iconic behind the scenes photos of the making of Nightmare, the first Nightmare. That's what's so shocking about the suggestion that wasn't real.
Yeah, no, I know. It was even featured in the documentary
Never Sleep Again.
Yeah, which is a great movie by Daniel Farrens, another Halloween connection there. He wrote Halloween 6. So, I don't know. I just figured I'd throw it out there. That's what I came upon.
I liked the point you also brought up a few minutes ago about the Robert Englund audition, in the way that he made his audition into almost like a meta performance, where he dressed himself up. I mean, that's a real actor right there.
I was going to say, Robert Englund, when you really get into it, he's like a true thespian.
Oh, he's absolutely 100%.
He's not just some guy who does horror movies. He's into the scene. He's into the music scene, like an avant-garde music scene type of guy.
He was a theatrically trained actor.
Yeah,
all of it.
I mean, he knows his stuff, and it's great. I love listening to him talk. He can come off almost as creepy, I feel like, at times, as Freddy, sometimes when he does talk about doing the role.
Well, I think Freddy just got so, it's almost like you think about people like William Shatner, which is, again, a Halloween connection, who is forever connected to Captain Kirk.
Right.
Or you have, David Duchovny. He could do a million things, but he's always going to be Fox Mulder.
Right.
Well, Robert Englund, even though he's had a very storied career and has had other films and certainly a lot of underappreciated films, I'll give you one right off the top right here. Two of them. He directed a film that I love from probably the early 90s, I want to say, called 976 Evil.
Huh.
And it has Stephen Jeffries, who is from the movie Fright Night. And he directed that film. And you never really hear about that film in the conversation, but again, he's a director and a writer as well. He also did a version of the Phantom of the Opera that he was in. And he's so good in it.
I saw that. God, I think when it came out, I haven't thought about that in years.
It's like a grand Guignol version of Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah.
It's not a musical. It's none of that stuff. It's like goes back to the early, creepy version of Phantom of the Opera. Mm-hmm. And he was sort of paying homage to Lon Chaney, and being the man of 1,000 faces type style.
Yep.
And if you want to look that up and watch it, it might be a Charles Band production. If I could be wrong, I'm kind of just spitballing that, or not Stuart Gordon, but a Roger Corman or Charles Band, somewhere in that arena. So it's not like a big movie by any stretch, but his performance is really, really captivating and really, really interesting. And the type of actor that can act behind a mask. Now, you have, like the Michael Myers mask is one thing, or the Jason mask is one thing. But when you have the full head prosthetic over your face, and you can still emote through that.
He gets the taunt, you know. That was the goal.
That's tough. That's harder than people think.
Well, that was Wes. I mean, you know, let's face it. Wes is way more cerebral. With his thinking and writing, in terms of it being applied to a horror movie, quote unquote, or just a horror movie, quote unquote, compared to some of the, you know, the Friday the 13th or even Halloween, as much as it's my favorite. You know,
Halloween is like a primal film. You know, Nightmare on Elm Street, or like the films of David Cronenberg, or even the films of Tobe Hooper, are like you said, the perfect word you use. They're more cerebral. They're more like metatextual.
But it's perfect. It's the natural evolution. It's what a good filmmaker should do. Build upon what the foundations of the guys, you know, the guys who laid the foundation before him, right? And it makes sense that you would watch, you know, this is 1984, so Halloween, a couple of Halloweens have been out, and a bunch of Friday the 13th have been out.
This movie actually comes out well within the great slasher, iconic slasher era.
It's almost like, yeah, I guess he's a slasher. I know why you put him there.
He's a slasher.
It is. I guess mainly based more on the later movies, but this is so much more of a head trip horror movie for me, personally. But I want to quickly go back to when you were talking about the LA Times articles.
Oh yeah, that's fascinating.
Which is obviously a huge basis for all this. When I think it's fascinating that, you know, Wes, he correlated the similarities between these three articles over the was it a year or so that they came out, but the LA Times didn't. They just wrote 3 articles.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
They didn't know. They didn't see this. They didn't realize that they were writing about the same thing. So I get it. He saw the first one about the whole refugees and having the nightmares, and he kind of tucked that away and said, "Wow, that's interesting. That sounds like something out of a movie." Then he sees a second one and he goes, "Well, all right, weird. I'm going to tuck that away." And then there's this third one, which is really the one that he bases a lot of this movie on. And it was parents, these Cambodian parents who had a teenage son. And they were these refugees. And the son was having these horrible nightmares.
And he was like hiding a Mr. Coffee in his closet.
Well, they didn't find out till the night. Till he died. Yeah. It was, you know, he was saying like, this is a problem. And they're kind of like, look, we've been through this horrific thing. This is how your brain is processing it. It's okay. You're okay. And they were trying to, give him medicine to help him sleep and say, you just need rest. But he was like just staying up for days and days. And finally, you know, this one night he falls asleep on the couch and the dad carries him back up to bed thinking, thank God, that, you know, he finally is getting some rest. And they all go to bed. In the middle of the night, they hear him screaming at the top of his lungs. And by the time they get to him, he is stone cold dead.
Right.
He's just dropped dead. And then after that, they start looking around his room and they find the coffee pot hidden and the, you know.
Well, I mean, first off, like I mentioned in the introduction, if you really think about it, there is something very intrinsically frightening about the vulnerability of sleep.
But it's also the idea that when children aren't being believed by adults.
Right.
You know what I mean? And there's that whole thing that he wanted to play on too, you know?
And it also plays into this notion that exists within there's a few different parallels I was going to bring up as we're watching the movie between the Halloween franchise and the Nightmare franchise.
Of course, there's a lot.
One of them that's really prominent is the idea of generational trauma. And the passing on almost genetically of generational trauma.
Sure.
Or the idea of the sins of the father being paid by the wages of the son.
And that is, you know, specifically quoted by Craven, that term right there.
It's biblical.
As what he was playing on when writing this movie.
Yep.
And when we're going back to the Mask, same thing. He purposely thought about, you know, Michael Myers and Jason and said, like, I you know, kind of like, I got to do a Mask too, but it's got to be different, and that's why Freddie needs to be able to. He initially wanted Freddie to be even more like pus pouring out and all this stuff, and the makeup guys were like, "We just can't. You can't do that and get the level of acting you want out of him. And then if you want to do a puppet, you're obviously not going to get
right.
the human
just wouldn't
character
work at all.
So that's when he kind of had to back down to just the prosthetics. So anyway,
Can we just talk a minute about really what I consider the elephant in the room of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, and that is the glove.
Yeah, it's probably just as iconic as Freddy himself. You know what I mean? And Wes talks about trying to find that primal fear in humans that stems from basically caveman days of giant animals with claws. Right. Being the thing that humans were afraid of, afraid of in that time.
Ancient human fears that are still hardwired into the consciousness of modern man, and for a reason. And that that Wes Craven, Wes Craven is a guy who had 3 separate degrees. He had 2 undergraduate degrees, one in psychology, one in philosophy, and a master's degree in writing.
He was an actual college professor.
And he was a literal college professor. And I think it was Heather Langenkamp, I could be wrong about this, that tells this story of after she first read the sides that she was going to audition with for it, she was going to meet this director. She pictured it was going to be this frightening, like, dark, creepy guy. Yeah. And it ends up being this erudite professorial man in a turtleneck and a tweed jacket who comes out and is very soft-spoken and very thoughtful. Yeah. And it just goes to show you, because Wes understood the reason what makes Wes a fascinating horror director and a guy who created not one but at least 2 separate iconic horror franchises when you think of Scream as well, is that he understood that of all the genres in cinema, horror is the one that is most closely related to, psychology, and that you can add the most levels to. And he was just tailor-made to be a horror director. And like, I often put him up there, like when I think of, other directors that I would group him with, like I said earlier, I would group him with guys like David Cronenberg, with Tobe Hooper, and I keep using the word that you use because it's the right word, very cerebral artists. Yeah. And Wes's mastery of how to use human psychology against an audience in cinema is insanely cool to me.
And his writing, like throughout the movie, all his setups are subtle, but it all shows this amazing thought behind the way he's weaving this all together so that you're never hit over the head with stuff. But by the time you get to the end, you are loaded with all the information you need to sort of piece together the bigger picture here. But his writing is just great. And he's not, he's very vocal about where everything stems from, where all his influences are from this movie. Like, almost everything comes from somewhere. It's not haphazard or just because you had to fill in a couple pages of the script to get more minutes, or
there's like no filler. No filler. Everything, every minute of this film
everything is
matters.
There for a reason. And he has a lot of what might be interpreted as just weird horror movie moments in it actually all have meaning, or all have, maybe sometimes only to him. He does a lot of homages to film directors that he loves, and it's, I think, sometimes just to serve his own sort of, love for movies. Right. It's not necessarily huge to the story or anything else, or so obvious that anyone else is going to get it, I mean?
Well, he was like, a lot of his influences as a filmmaker weren't other filmmakers or films. Like, he was very influenced by like Louis Buñuel, who of course is a filmmaker. But what I'm saying, like, he was very influenced also by like surrealist art.
Dali,
Salvador Dali.
Right, yeah. So
and other filmmakers that sort of were influenced by outside art or outsider art, I should say, and that really kind of pours into this film, especially.
No, it is odd. On the flip side of this coin of Wes Craven being the cerebral college professor, amazing filmmaker, leading up to him getting into the mainstream movies, he was practically making porn.
Oh, I did not know that. I know he had a partnership with, of all people, Sean S. Cunningham.
Right.
Who also started in softcore porn.
Right. Well, they were doing stuff together, and Wes was in a bunch of them, just like small parts. He wasn't doing anything risque, but he's under fake names in a lot of them.
Wait a minute. Whoa.
Yeah.
Like he's in the movie?
Yeah, he's got very small little cameos in some of them, and he directed a lot of them under other names.
Oh, now I do. I think I have a memory of this somewhere in my head. It was a strange name that he used.
He did. And I can't think of it right now.
I'm going to Google it right now.
And I believe I remember even that he has a very uncredited, but he had something to do with the famous movie Deep Throat.
Abe Snake.
That's what it is, yeah.
He called himself Abe Snake. Now, it says it was a pseudonym Craven used when he directed the 1975 porn film The Fireworks Woman.
Right. But he did it a bunch. They always talk about a couple that have these like crazy names, but so it's very interesting.
Wow, there's a lot of articles about him. He worked literally in the porn industry.
That's what I'm saying.
I did not know this.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's such a weird turn, you know what I mean? And I'm very surprised, and I don't know if this is very dumb thinking.
I should have researched this movie before we recorded this.
No, but
that's typical of me. If you've listened to this show before, you know this is typical of me.
I thought it was interesting that a guy who did, basically some early 60s, 70s porn, that when he did get into horror movies, which are known to, show the
they're in that
the
same exploitation.
But notice his movies
stylization.
But like this movie didn't.
No.
It does portray the young kids who are sexually active being the targets of the killer. But it doesn't show any skin, really.
Well, we'll get more into this as we watch the movie, but it is interesting that the two main characters of Nightmare on Elm Street are on the surface very chaste. You have Glenn Lance and Nancy, and the two of them as a couple are just like as chaste and as virginal as you get.
Yeah, just the all-American.
Although I'm going to start, as we watch the movie, I'm going to be bringing in some ideas that are a little bit deeper about Nancy and about her relation to Freddy. And about Freddy's relation to Nancy. And I talked about on our Instagram page recently, and I'm going to bring it up as we watch the movie as well, about a very interesting avenue of marketing they did for these movies, and this one included. But anyway.
So, yeah, I guess we should probably get to the movie soon. So, before we do that, though, what I want to bring up is, obviously, we're doing this where I'm assuming everybody has seen this movie.
Yeah.
All right, so we can talk about the ending.
I don't think anybody's watching this for the first time, it here. It's for the fans. We're doing this for the fans.
So the ending of this movie obviously was, during the making of the movie, Robert Shaye and Wes Craven, they had their ups and downs, right?
Robert Shaye was sort of a frustrated director.
Right. And he basically, he bought the movie. He kind of owned the movie. Business-wise, it was his at this point. He optioned it, even though Wes wrote it and directed it, and they paid Wes to continue developing it once they sort of bought it. It was basically his thing. So there would become this battle at times between who really has the last say here, the writer-director or the guy who bought the rights to the movie and is paying to have it made, right? So much, I mean, we'll talk about as the movie goes on. There are lots of money problems. So we get to the end of the movie, and now there's a huge argument between Wes, probably the biggest, between Wes and Bob Shaye over how it should end. Bob, in a nutshell, Bob wants there to be an avenue for sequels, but Wes's idea was for it to be basically a happy ending. Door opens, Mom and her friends are back, and she drives off into a sunny day, seemingly have defeated Freddy. And then the what's the word I'm looking for here? They both decide on
they compromise.
Compromise.
Yep.
I don't know. I couldn't think of it. So the compromise was to sort of imply that Freddy's still around. He's the car. He grabs Mom, and you don't really know. Kind of,
which
really
is similar to an ending like you
Nancy,
had in Carrie,
right? Yeah,
or something like that. With this, like, or even the first Friday the 13th, where Jason at the end he jumps up out of the water. Like the evil is not over.
Right.
There's the possibility to continue.
So, I don't know if this is common amongst the masses. I bet it's common thinking amongst Nightmare on Elm Street fans, and as I've been really just delving into it more hardcore lately, I think there's a couple different ways to really interpret the whole movie, and depending on how you look at clues throughout the movie as we go forward, it can support, I think, different avenues for how you think
the interpretation of it.
Yeah,
right.
So I want to sort of be able to talk about those as we get into the movie.
Oh, absolutely.
But basically, there's the sort of, I think, the common thinking way of that, Nancy figures out she can pull this guy out of her dreams and to try and defeat him. But then she realizes, hey, I can actually take the power away from him and defeat him sort of that way instead of literally just, physically killing him.
See, the thing with it, though, is that this movie, from its opening moments to its final moments, and I'm talking just about the first movie in this franchise, the one we're covering today.
Yeah, exactly.
It always has the audience on its back foot as to whether you're in a dream,
right,
whether you're in reality,
and that was done
somewhere
on purpose.
In between, and that's done on purpose.
Right.
And it purposefully obfuscates the ability, I think, to have a concrete interpretation of anything.
Well, in a way, though, he does give you concrete clues along the way to show you the difference between what, relative to Nancy, what is reality versus dream. But I think when you get to that last scene, right before Freddy disappears into his his stardust, there's a huge line that you have to focus on, and a lot of people might kind of skip over it. She goes, I know what this whole thing is now. This whole thing has been a dream. The whole movie has been a dream.
Okay, all right.
We have not been in and out, and really, reality starts from her walking that door. The whole thing's been a precognitive sort of nightmare.
Okay.
About having, it's like a dream within a dream, right? Or, because Wes, and I do think that's how Wes was generally approaching it from a writing point of view when he was thinking about his happy ending. You know what I mean?
Right.
The ending is that she wakes up and realizes that whole thing was a dream. Whoa. You know what I mean? Because Mom wasn't going to get sucked out the door. She was just going to get in the car with the friends. Now, we were still going to see the girls jump roping, but it was going to be a little more... just happy ending. Freddy's defeated. Then you can also step one step further back, and there are people who say that the entire thing, including the ending with Freddy showing back up, is the dream of the filmmaker.
Well, that's deep.
Right.
That's deep.
That Wes sort of is the dreamer of this whole thing, and that's
okay.
You know what I mean?
Jump forward decades. Jump forward decades, with that thought in mind.
I know,
to Wes Craven's New Nightmare,
exactly.
where Wes Craven brings a meta-textual level, and the whole movie becomes literally Wes Craven is a character in his own film. Heather Langenkamp is Heather Langenkamp, as well as being Nancy in the film.
Right.
So in that sense, as a bookend, okay, I can see that.
I see
that argument makes sense.
I do see it making sense. I don't know in my head if I think that Wes was thinking of it that way. I do think that, and there's deleted scenes or some dialogue in the script, the first version, that really even helps support the idea more. That I think there was supposed to be a bigger aha moment at the end that the whole movie was a dream. Besides just that one line where she says whole thing was a dream.
I more kind of align myself, if I had to choose, with that.
Yeah, and really
More
the
than
nightmare is
anything else.
just starting at the end. You know what I mean? When she gets in that car.
There's a couple parts of this or aspects of A Nightmare on Elm Street, this one, that I connect actually to a movie that came out far, far after Christopher Nolan's Inception. Now, in Inception, which is another dream logic film, like that movie, we talked about, we do a trailer park episode on the Nightmare on Elm Street trailer, and we talk a little bit about the movie Dreamscape.
Yeah.
Well, dream logic movies, you really do, unless you're trying to make something incredibly surrealist, I think you have to have something that is a ground. A way to ground the audience in some semblance of where reality is and where disreality is. And in Christopher Nolan's Inception, he has the very elegant way of using the top.
Right.
Leo's top. He spins the top. If the top falls over, he's in the dream. Or if the top falls over, he's awake. If the top continues to spin, he's in a dream. And they have these totems. All the characters have these special totems that no one else can touch. And it works in the story world, but it also works as an indicator for the audience to be understanding where dreams and reality delineate.
Right.
And the interesting thing in A Nightmare on Elm Street, and I think is part of Wes Craven's idea of how to kind of elucidate the horror, is to disallow the audience to have that kind of a life preserver of consciousness, of understanding where the nightmare ends and reality begins, to always feel confused and disoriented, which is similar to the subjective point of view of the characters and the fear that they're feeling.
And oddly enough, that was one of the biggest factors that made this film hard for them to sell.
I bet.
Because most of the other studios or people who would read the script would be like, I don't think this is going to be very scary, because people aren't going to know it's a dream. Like, they're not going to be scared by it. These things, because they're not going to know when it's a dream or not, or if that, because he was.
Because if it's a dream, it doesn't have the weight of consequence that you have in reality.
Well, it's not. It wasn't being written in that stereotypical idea that when people would enter a dream world, everything becomes so over the top, they're in a dream. In Wes's movies, when these people get sucked, until they're faced with Freddy, the world seems like the world to them.
Well, it's one of those things where, and everybody knows this, it's a universal notion, when you have certain dreams that are abstract, but then you have those dreams that you wake up and you didn't realize you were dreaming.
Oh,
and they feel very realistic.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that, at least for me, are the most unsettling.
Yeah.
And they don't even have to be nightmares. They're just unsettling because your brain,
you
your
feel
mind,
like you experience this really weird thing.
Your subconscious mind is creating this three-dimensional simulation that's so realistic that it makes you wonder in your conscious mind, well, what is this
And
then?
that's the idea behind those refugees, that this kid, when they did the autopsy on that kid after he died in sleep, there was no heart failure, there was no... He died. Fear literally killed him.
Well, that
whatever
idea,
was happening in his head...
If you die,
his body shut down.
If you die in your dream, you die in real life. Everybody's heard that I would call, for lack of a better term, I'd call it an urban legend.
Yeah, of course, because I think a lot of people have had dreams where you fall out of something.
And the minute you're going to hit the ground, you snap awake. All that stuff is kind of factored into this universality of experience that all humans.
Yeah.
And when you're trying to create a horror film, and you're trying to create something that's based in the strongest emotion that there is, which is fear, you really want to try to find things that the widest amount of people can relate to. Mm-hmm. And this certainly movie is just chock full of them. But we'll go over that.
Let's start heading towards watching the movie.
2 hours in, we haven't even got to the movie yet. Welcome to Haddonfield Radio.
This is the beginning of a new franchise. Yeah. It's a legendary movie. There's a lot to talk about.
Before we do, though, I just like to say something I always like to say, Joe and I both, before we jump into the movie. A couple quick things. Just like we've always said before when we were covering all the Halloween films in Season 1, the same platitude exists. Joe and I are not experts on these movies. We're not experts on this movie or any of the ones that come after it. We are just fans. And all we want to do with this show is make it feel like you're hanging out with your friends, watching a movie you love, and talking about movies and things that you love about them. It's all this is supposed to be. If we get things wrong, or if we are off base on something, well, just let us know in the comments. I mean, if you know something we don't, or we say something that needs to be corrected, well, please let us know in the comments section. Joe and I read every single comment, and not every single comment needs to be flowery kindness. If you have something critical or constructive criticism, please let us know, because that only helps us going forward. And if you have something that you like that we're doing, let us know, because, well, it feels good.
So you can rip Christian apart. Yeah, be gentle with me, okay?
You can rip me to shreds. I actually prefer when people tell me something I got wrong, because I don't want to sound like an ass.
No, of course. I don't want to be wrong about anything.
No, I mean, I try to do my homework and my research.
Exactly.
But I'm like you. I have a job. I have a life. I'm doing the best I can.
Like a lot of movies, there's a lot of stories out there, and there can be a lot of misinformation too. And we try to be good about picking through it all. But we can be victims too of just reading a rumor or two.
Yeah, and honestly, a lot of you out there listening to this are probably more knowledgeable than we are about this film. All I'm saying is we're doing this because we love these movies, and we love talking about movies.
Yeah.
And that's why we do this show. Total.
Try to bring you some of the facts about the filmmaking that maybe you don't get on your average
right.
Making of or watching.
And we're also just giving you our subjective kind of point of view about the films. So that's all we want to say.
So thank you guys. Thank you. We appreciate it.
Yeah, I want to say more than anything else how much Joe and I deeply, sincerely appreciate your support. If you're taking time out of your busy life to listen to this right now, we love you, and we deeply, truly, and sincerely appreciate you. And it really means the world to us.
Even if you're one of those people that listen to us to fall asleep, then
there's apparently a lot of people who listen to us to fall asleep at night. Now, I listen to a lot of podcasts to fall asleep, so I get it.
Okay,
and it's certainly, I think it's a compliment. But whatever you're doing, however you're taking in this content, if you enjoy this content, if you like what we're doing here on Haddonfield Radio, if you could do us the smallest favor, the only thing we will ever ask of you, we will never have a Patreon. We will never ask you for $1. We will never ask you for any of that. The only thing we will ever ask you that would mean the world to us, if you haven't done it already, just hit that subscribe button and leave a comment. Let us know what you like, what you didn't like, what we could do better, what we could do worse. Let us know. We love hearing from you. It means the world to us when we do the live streams. We love reaching out and talking to you guys, live one-on-one. And we love hearing from you in the comments section. So just let us know you're out there. And if you subscribe, we can let you know when new episodes are going to air. We have this series. We have our Haddonfield Trailer Park series. We're developing some more content that's going to be coming in the future. We've been doing these cool live streams, and we just want to let you know when those are available. So please do that for us if you haven't already. And if you have, thank you so much for that support. It really does mean the world to us. And every single time we get a subscriber, I have a little happy moment, and so does Joe, and it means the world to us. So anyway, let's jump into the movie, because we love you, and we love watching movies with you. And we're going to be going in and watching Wes Craven's 1984 seminal horror classic, one of the most iconic horror movies of all time, A Nightmare on Elm Street. And it's coming right up now.
All right, here we go.
I absolutely love this retro New Line Cinema logo. I can't get enough of it. I love that. I'm sort of like a font junkie, and I absolutely love that font.
Now, I think it's interesting that this beginning, talking from a technical standpoint, that they boxed the intro with the titles under it, and that was done. It wasn't like that in the theater, but when they moved it to home video, they realized that the credits were getting cut off.
Okay, yeah.
So they had to move things around, which I kind of give me the image full frame. But anyway.
Interestingly enough, I think in our Haddonfield Radio Trailer Park, when we did the episode 4, when we covered the Nightmare on Elm Street trailer, I misidentified the blades that were used to make Freddy's glove, and I called them steak knives, and I wanted to correct that.
Yeah.
They were actually called Case XX P210 Grapefruit Tomato Knives.
Yeah. And
now that's a very specific thing,
it is.
And I wanted to make sure to get that out there.
In the glove makers. And in that whole beginning sequence, that wasn't Robert Englund. Well, I've heard two stories. So I've heard it's either Tony Caesar, stunt coordinator, or Charles Bellardinelli. I'm not.
That was playing Freddy. Pre-burn.
And Charles was an effects guy who also helped build the glove, and I actually think it was him, because I've heard him tell the story, even though Wes has said it was the Tony Caesar guy. I think he just was misremembering.
Right.
But so it wasn't Robert, and it was one of the effects guys that they just kind of were like, that was one of the last things they shot was Freddy building the glove. Also, really quick, fun fact number one.
We're starting right off.
Oh yeah, the lamb. I know. I'm sorry. I got to keep up in the beginning.
The lamb really is interesting. It's surrealist.
It's one of the most asked questions about, because a lot of people are just like, what the hell? And that was just one of his homages, like you mentioned earlier, to Louis Buñuel. And it was he made a movie. He was a surrealist. He had these lambs in a movie, and that was just sort of his homage, just very surreal thrown in there. Again, I think that was done more for him than, it's supposed to. Obviously, it's a dream. It's another indicator that this is not reality, but
Another dream logic director that I always think of when I watch this original Nightmare on Elm Street is Jodorowsky. Who made Holy Mountain, and he also uses a lot of surrealist imagery in his films, and he's very painterly and has a lot of dream logic in his films, and I always think of him when I see, and that lamb in particular really gives me that Jodorowsky kind of vibe.
And here in the boiler room, where a lot of movies use things like the bee smoke, like they did in Halloween 2 in the steam room. Wes actually got boilers and used real steam. There's nothing quite like it, of course, using the real thing. And, so credit to them for using, getting as authentic as possible when they could.
In terms of story mechanics, what I find really interesting about this film as well is it doesn't start off in an expositional sense. It doesn't start out with
you get Freddy
identifying
building the
your
glove.
Characters. You do get that.
So you have to establish why it's terrifying that this guy is kind of coming after them, and also if you're going to start the movie with those claws coming through the cloth, you kind of have to give a point of reference, right?
Yeah, but what I mean is it doesn't start out with that kind of inert scenes, just kind of setting the world.
Oh, yeah, no.
It just sort of throws you right in.
Think about how long it is before we actually find out who Freddy is.
Right.
To them, it's just this dream guy. There's no background associated to it. It takes a long time for them to figure out that they are the kids of these parents who did this thing.
Right.
Now, really quick, too, this shot's amazing, technically. So you're moving from slow motion into normal motion, while also the diffusion that's making everything all white there in the beginning is going away. Now we're in normal speed. This is all done with a very early computer device that would get hooked up to the computer.
Okay, whoa. Say that. What are you saying?
But also, look, we're tracking,
see the word
we're dialing.
Ogre? Look at the word ogre on the license plate, ogre, which is a mythological precept. Go ahead.
And so this shot does just about everything at a time when it was harder. Nowadays cameras almost
it's almost like an early computer effect.
It's computer controlled. You know what I mean? Now a camera would have these settings built into it. It's changing the speed from half speed to normal speed, moving a diffusion filter, from in front of the lens off. And so they had 6 people had to operate this camera at the same time for it to go from slow motion to normal motion, diffusion to no diffusion, to start tracking, to start dollying, to zoom, and keep focused the whole time. It was actually, I'm just saying, it was a really amazing shot. And the cinematographer, Jacques Hatkin, I'm sorry, I'm saying his name, and I actually think they call him Jack a lot, but, he's really good. When you think about the small budget they had.
This movie was made for $1.1 million,
right,
which is nothing.
And
even then was nothing.
And think about all of it wasn't given to the for film and cameras and lighting and all that.
See Freddy's hat hanging on the... Did you notice Freddy's hat's hanging in the window?
Yeah, I did not. Nice.
And it sort of looks like it's looming down on them. The angle of it is placed so it looks like it's looming down.
Also, fun fact, number 2, the little girl skipping the rope in the beginning. The girl in the middle, actually doing the skipping, the blonde, is the daughter of the people who owned Nancy's house.
Oh, that's very
that
interesting.
they had to, like, get permission to use and all that.
Can I throw a fun fact in?
Sure, please do.
All the boiler room footage that you saw earlier in the movie and continues through was actually filmed in the basement of the Lincoln Heights Jail in Los Angeles.
That's weird. That's my next look at it. That was my next fact
robbed,
right there.
I robbed Joe out of a fun fact. Joe, just to let you guys know, Joe has always has a piece of paper with him that has his fun facts neatly written out on it.
I don't want to say neatly,
he puts his time in.
Oh, yeah. But the funny thing was, they found out after they filmed in that jail that right after they filmed, they got condemned because it's covered in asbestos.
Oh, great.
So
now they're all going to die.
Yeah, well.
Well, actually, most of them, I guess all of them have made it pretty far. It's so interesting. Look at Johnny Depp. Look at how beautiful. I mean, Johnny Depp, I don't care what anybody says. He's always been one of my favorite actors, and he continues to be. This is his first
movie. Charlie Sheen was really close. He just wanted a little too much money.
I could have seen Charlie Sheen playing.
He was. I mean, they were basically going to give it to him, but he just wanted too much money.
Here's the thing, though. Here's why I don't think Charlie Sheen ultimately would have worked. What Johnny Depp has that Charlie Sheen doesn't is Johnny Depp has this angelic, sort of chaste. Innocent feeling about it. Charlie Sheen just immediately
and Charlie Sheen
too much confidence.
Charlie Sheen talks about how basically he didn't get the script. He just didn't get it. You know what I mean? He would have, I guess, done it, but he didn't get it. And it's interesting though that they did pick Johnny Depp. Not that Charlie Sheen was much bigger, but he's supposed to be the quarterback, All-American football player. He kind of comes off a little more like the sensitive.
I think Johnny Depp, he's just so sensitive. He just exudes that.
I know. So if you look even in his bedroom later, he's got the Letterman jacket there. He's wearing the football shirt, crop top thing. He's supposed to be the. And that's why right now when Rod shows up, he throws him the thing and says, and the crowd goes wild. Like, he's kind of known to be the football player,
I think the important thing, though, in the subtext of this film is that you keep Glenn, the character Johnny Depp plays, Glenn Lance, again, very chaste and very innocent, because the other suitor for Nancy's attention is actually Freddie. Right. Freddie has, as we'll get into the film, Freddie has more than a homicidal feeling towards Nancy, I would argue. I would argue there is a psychosexual angle between Nancy and Freddie that works both ways.
He's playing definitely on the idea that Nancy is not sexually promiscuous.
Right.
That it's a little more unnerving to her to go to that sexual.
Well, here's the thing.
Place.
We talked in season 1 about what makes what Michael Myers' real weapon isn't the kitchen knife or a scalpel, it's trauma. Well, Freddy's got a very interesting weapon that isn't his glove, and that is the ability to enter into the subconscious, the mind of his victim.
Right.
He sees your secrets. Mm-hmm. He knows everything you want to hide. He knows more about you than you know.
He's omniscient.
Exactly.
He knows everything.
He has that godlike point of view over you, and what that equates to is ultimate control, dominant psychological control. And so he sees something in Nancy that either Nancy doesn't know consciously about herself or is subverting inside of herself.
Because even if he's only now revealing himself to these kids in their dreams, it doesn't mean he hasn't been there the whole time watching.
And you see, like,
in their dreams,
Tina and her boyfriend are the mirror opposite of Nancy and her boyfriend, and you see this dichotomy all through the beginning of this film in how the two couples are portrayed. Even when Glenn kisses Nancy earlier, a couple scenes ago, if you notice, the minute he connects with her lips, she pulls her head away.
Yeah.
Here, she's rejecting him.
She's there for a friend. This isn't supposed to be about just messing around.
So it plays into, again, this chestnut that you see in a lot of the slasher classics of the virginal final girl.
Right.
But I would argue that
Nancy's very different.
Has very different and has a much deeper subtextual dimension.
She doesn't just survive. She sets a trap. She fights back. She's just as,
But I would argue that, much like Michael Myers and Laurie Strode, Freddy unlocks something in Nancy.
Right. Oh,
that
definitely.
brings her into her mature adulthood.
There's the point in the movie where she flip-flops from being the kid to being the mom with her mom.
Exactly.
And that's the same. Now, a couple quick fun facts. This whole scene was based on a true experience that Wes had when he first moved away from home in college and had to stay in this like artist loft, and the people he was staying with were just making love all night long, and he was still a virgin.
My God, that's
he
so
said he had the
funny.
worst night of his life. And now, even going way back when we first saw Tina waking up from her dream, the guy that shows up with Tina's mom, it was Johnny Depp's agent. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, they needed a guy, and he was so happy because they gave him a line.
Wait, the guy that says to come back to the
Yeah,
bedroom?
that was like Johnny.
Oh my God, that's so funny.
And he was so psyched because they gave him a line, which meant he got into SAG and he got some money, and it was this whole thing. Now we should talk about Rod,
quote unquote Nick Corey.
right? Who's goes by.
I don't even know how to really pronounce his real first name.
Yeah, Zoo.
Zoo? It's
Well,
JSU.
But it's Jesus.
Okay.
Garcia, Zoo Garcia and that was done. He said, back in the 80s, it just was less acceptable to be
Have an
a
ethnic name.
Latin name,
Yep.
and they wanted him to play this Italian kid, and that's what he's supposed to be going for here. Now, he. I think in the Never Sleep Again documentary, he sort of intones that there was like a sort of underlying racism that was going on. He was saying basically I would never have gotten the part if I used my real name. Right, correct. But he also had a drug problem throughout this movie. Right. And it was in the later years.
Like hard drugs.
Heroin.
Yeah.
And in the jail scene at the end with Nancy, when he's like really kind of sweaty and it's a real intense scene, he says he came to work high that day and he regrets it. Now he's sober and he says, I'm crying in that scene, not because I'm acting well. He goes, I'm crying because my life is so shitty right then. And he goes, I regretted that I came to work high. I knew I was high. I was all messed up. I couldn't remember anything. They were feeding me. He goes, but they didn't know. Like, you listen to the commentaries for years later, and you listen to Heather Langenkamp talk about how great, like, his acting was and intense it was in that scene. Because they didn't know till more recently. Now, that is a tooth. So that's
my God, that's a tooth.
Fun fact.
He's throwing teeth at the window?
Fun fact. Well, it's an homage. Again, so that was... hold on.
Get out the list.
It was a famous director, Polanski.
Roman Polanski,
and his movie, Tenant. The guy goes and picks a tooth out of the wall.
Oh my God, that's so interesting.
And so that was what that was.
Yeah, because Wes Craven was really inspired by Roman Polanski as a filmmaker.
I don't think you could tell it's a tooth until these high-def versions came out.
This mechanical, would be called a mechanical effect here, was
practical.
Practical mechanical effect was pulled off by Jim Doyle.
Right, and that's him actually playing Freddy.
And there were two main special effects technicians that handled this film. One was called David Miller, and is called.
He was more makeup.
And then there was Jim Doyle, who also created the glove, along with this guy named Lou Carlucci, and even with some help by this production designer named David Fonseca. I guess they all sort of... It's almost like in the Friday the 13th franchise, a lot of people take credit for who came up with the hockey mask.
Jim Doyle drew the design. There's no question.
Yep.
Then other guys who were effects guys on the movie had to build it. And there was just a couple of them that had to build it. There was like 5 different, gloves.
But I love that practical effect of Freddy pushing through the wall.
It's a giant piece of spandex, and you put the light just ahead of it, so you can't even tell there's a light there until the shapes hit it.
The only problem I have with it, in a logical sense, is wouldn't his glove pop right through?
Well, okay, you want to talk about
I guess
a bigger problem?
It's dream logic.
Well, is it? So this goes back to what I'm talking about. This whole movie being a dream.
So you're
wait a minute. Listen. Okay. Let me ask you something. What are the rules regarding Freddy to you in terms of what he can and can't do when you think about the movie and?
Well, I think the major rule is if you are awake, Freddy can't hurt you. If you are asleep, Freddy can kill you. That's one that pops to mind.
Are there any rules in your head about what he can and can manipulate and when he can manipulate these things?
Well, I personally would suggest that it has to involve sleep.
Right. So I feel like a lot of people take away the idea that Freddy can't manipulate the real world unless you literally drag him into it, which Nancy does. That what he does is in the dream world.
is God.
But I know great line.
Love that line.
In the arms, and I love that's not Robert Englund.
You can
totally
tell it's not Robert
right?
Englund.
Because he's got to be right here for this.
It doesn't have the Freddy posture.
He's
or anything.
short.
Yeah.
But anyway, as much as that effect is great with him coming through the wall, it kind of breaks the idea that Freddy can't just do things in the real world. Well, if she's not asleep, Nancy isn't asleep. So why is he coming through the wall?
Okay,
it's not. You're not in a dream there. You are if the whole movie is a dream. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. No. I like I said when you were saying that when we were talking earlier. I feel like I align myself more with that theory.
Yeah.
That the whole movie is a dream.
I'm pretty sure.
This is an awesome effect. Again, that is just beautifully done. Beautiful practical effects work. Just absolutely
so
gorgeous.
You got to talk about the room spinning, a great effect that they had to literally have people spinning this giant room.
This is another one of the moments of this film that connects me to Inception. In Christopher Nolan's film. And Christopher Nolan also built the spinning room.
Right.
So did Kubrick in 2001. And I'm sure there have been other examples of it.
There's so much to talk about here.
But for a very inexpensive movie, this is a very elaborate set.
Oh my God. And there's so much work between nailing every light down. This guy's hair had to be glued down because he's upside down right now. Now, what's great is when they film this, they also film this from Freddy's perspective where you see him dragging her. You physically see him there on the wall upside down too, dragging her. And what's great is if you listen, you hear him. If you go back and listen carefully through this scene,
that's really
you will hear him groaning and pulling and growling at her. And it's because it's still the audio from when they shot You Could See Freddy, and then they realized it was just a little too much. It was too scary. And so this scene is also famously one of the scenes that had to get trimmed for them to get the rated R.
I mean, it was just occurring to me. I mean, that is a lot of blood.
It is.
In the slice to her chest is also pretty gnarly.
It's a practical effect, so there were 4 wires under the skin, and they just kind of rip it through, and the wires kind of pull and make that effect,
In a lot of practical effects, especially in horror movies, they do that gratuitous thing where the wound opens and the blood sprays out. But in reality, if you were to get a huge rip like that, it actually doesn't bleed right away. It's almost like your body doesn't even understand what's happened.
This police station is actually a library, the local library that they filmed in that made it look like a police station.
Yep, did a good job.
And back to the Tina scene, so they had to cut basically the moment she hits the bed because there was a big blood splatter right there.
Yeah, right.
And then when Nancy comes in the room and looks at the body, we see it, but it was a lot longer, the shot held, and you could see the body a lot longer, and they made them trim that for the rated R. And also later they had them trim some of the blood that you see with Glenn's death, and it kind of really killed Wes.
Will you explain for those of the people listening that might not know about the 13-second difference?
Well, so that's the 13 seconds that in the U.S. they made them cut. However, overseas, like in Australia, I believe, and Germany, they were able to show the movie with those 13 seconds uncut.
And subsequently,
and so when it came to home video time, when you could get the old PAL VHS from Australia, say, and still see those 13 seconds. And there are some transfers on YouTube. At least I found the 6 or 7 seconds that are from Tina's death scene. And I'll put those a link to those in the comments below. I tried really hard to actually try and find a supposed Laserdisc version that had those 13 seconds, and I got the Laserdisc and I transferred the whole thing, and they weren't there. So I did try hard to give you guys those, but it's basically blood splatter.
The thing is, this was in the height of like the Dick Valenti MPAA era, where essentially the censorship of a lot of art in movies was so strong. Tipper Gore, Dick Valenti, all these people these conservative mindset that these types of films were disturbing the consciousnesses of young people. Now, we all know, anyone with half a brain knows that that's just bullshit. Art doesn't distort anybody's mind. There are certain people who are already distorted, who can be affected by stuff like that, content like that. But reality, it's interesting to me that 13 seconds of footage can be the difference between a film that can be released and cannot be released.
When you think about how much other blood is shown, you know what I mean? Like, they really thought that those 13 seconds were more over the top than anything else we saw in the movie. But you do have to remember this movie. They used 500 gallons of fake blood while making this movie.
Kubrickian explosion of blood from Glenn's bed.
And that's another slight homage, right? The blood from the elevator scene in The Shining is also supposed to be Glenn's.
And they chose to use that the Dick Smith blend of blood that had a very kind of bright red.
Yeah.
And the reason that Dick Smith made this iconic blood blend was because it didn't actually look like real blood.
Right.
And so it allowed a tiny bit of leeway for filmmakers that were creating more transgressive cinema to use blood more liberally. And our iconic effects artists like Tom Savini, Rick Baker, Rob Bottin, they all kind of used. Dick Smith would give everyone that blend.
Here's a funny thing. If you listen, you'll hear Rod say, like, I'm cool, but his mouth isn't moving. Yeah.
Oh, that's so weird.
Yeah, there's a few small technical gaps like that in this movie.
On a big screen, that must have been incredibly noticeable.
I know, huh?
But I kind of like that. It's those little flaws that make something beautiful.
They didn't know they had a classic. For all they knew, I mean, they were just trying to get this done as much as Wes believed in it,
I mean, it's a low-budget horror film, and that's what it was.
Again, and I always talk about this in movies. Oh, and that's Lynn Shay,
who's to this day has a huge. She might be bigger now than she's ever been.
Sister of Bob Shay.
Yep, she was the sister of New Line Cinema creator and producer of this movie, Robert Shay. And everybody might know her, especially from the Conjuring universe, the James Wan Conjuring universe.
And she was in Wes's New Nightmare.
Yep.
She's in that.
She's a very established actress.
The surfer dude who gets up in a minute and does the reading is Daryl Hannah's brother.
What?
Don Hannah, I believe. Yeah.
That's another. That should have been a fun fact.
Right. And
this right here?
Yeah, this kid. And this whole scene, Wes just went to a real high school, observed the class, and this is literally like the passage. A kid got up and read the Hamlet, and this is what they were studying, and like this is just verbatim what was going on that day in the classroom.
I like the detail of Nancy Thompson putting her name on the spine of the book. I really like that. It's a nice detail.
And we should talk how we were introduced a few minutes ago to Ronnie Blakely and John Saxon as Nancy's parents.
Well, this is really quick though. This is one of my favorite. This is some of my favorite iconography of this whole franchise.
Yeah. So the shooting. Let's go back and talk about Jacques Hatkin, the cinematographer.
I would say like Haitkin or Hatkin.
Hatkin. Yeah, I'm so bad with names. I forget.
Sorry, whoever. If you're out there listening, which I'm sure you aren't, we apologize.
I think he did just an amazing job. And an interesting fact about him as a cinematographer is he wore an eye patch over the eye that wasn't looking through the lens because he believed. It allowed him to just look, use his good eye more normally.
Okay,
there's no strain. You're not thinking about. You're not holding that muscle. And you're just looking naturally and light, and everything is entering your eye, and you're shooting. Just, it was just something he believed in a very unique, I think, factor. But yeah, the way this all worked, the blood trail,
And look at the blood that's used on the ground. You notice it doesn't even look like the color of blood. Of course, Freddy's sweater colors here and the hall guard. And I know this is a common little piece of lore, but Wes Craven chose the red and the green because it has a very upsetting effect on the iris of the human eye.
So yeah, he saw an article that they said it was the hardest combination of colors for the brain to process. When he originally wrote, this is another fun fact, when he originally wrote the script, he was using red and yellow because those were the colors of Plastic Man, the old superhero. Remember with the 70s Elvis glasses?
Right.
And he could change shape. Just like Freddy. See, to Wes, if you notice, Freddy can also change his shape. That's how he becomes the phone. That's how he's like the car at the end. That's how he's anything, that's just, So, and then he read that article and he decided to change the colors.
And it ends up being literally one of the most iconic costume design for a character ever.
Mm-hmm. And now, we just went from the school and now we're back. They cleverly edited and we're back here in the old jail, making the boiler room.
I like the idea that Freddy is in that boiler room like he was some sort of almost like a janitor or something to that effect.
So there were scenes shot.
Look at that shot.
There were scenes shot for the boiler room area that were ultimately cut. I don't know if you see them for a second somewhere, but you basically saw his whole little lair from, when he was alive, because this is where he is. This is, you're back where he used to take his victims and kill the kids, right?
Right.
And so you saw this like dirty bed surrounded by like naked Barbie dolls and creepy things.
Oh, I like that. I wish we could have seen that.
You can see it, and I think that there are some of the deleted scenes and some of the DVD releases and whatnot. It's out there.
Here's something interesting with Robert Englund's performance. You saw it in the establishing shot there, Freddy, when he comes out from behind the boiler.
Yeah.
He does this thing where he hangs his shoulder low.
Well, the glove was heavy.
But it really...
Yeah, it gave him a gunslinger
pose, and it gives you this feeling of the weight of the glove, and the weight equates in your mind to danger.
And it also he learned how to recognize the iconic bits and pieces of Freddy and really play with them.
And as an actor, he knew how you build a silhouette for a character.
Right. He loved the silhouette of Freddy.
Identifiable.
Yes, exactly. And so now if you start watching as Nancy is going in and out of supposed dreams, right? You'll see the clues. Like when she first starts going through the school hallways, all of a sudden there were leaves blowing around. When you see fog,
just like then, when she saw the hall monitor at first, it didn't occur to her that something was wrong with the way the hall monitor looked.
Right.
So she learns and is intelligent enough to pick up, like you're saying, she picks up on cues that she can start to identify. And I would make this weird argument I was thinking about when I was rewatching this movie, preparing for this, that I wonder if also Freddy doesn't have the ability, the almost supernatural ability, to kind of provoke sleep in people.
Oh.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because, there are certain points in all of these movies where it almost seems like they're falling asleep at points where you wouldn't normally fall asleep, and without having a reason of exhaustion or tiredness. I wonder if Freddy has some ability to control that in the mind. Just a thought.
Yeah, it sounds totally plausible. And I think the burn mark here, another gaffe, is that it moves from inside her arm to outside her arm, or vice versa, rather.
Right.
But... hey, we'll let it slide. So, the other thing to talk about a little bit as you're watching the outdoor scenes is, although in the, I believe in part 2, they established that we are in Springwood, Ohio. In this movie, as they were filming it, it was supposed to be ambiguous.
Right.
You don't even really see the street sign, Elm Street. I think it was shot for a scene that was actually cut, but you don't really, get that. So a lot of people sometimes give the movie crap because you see palm trees at times.
Yeah,
because they shot it in California.
I'm never bothered by stuff
but the
like
point
that.
was that
Springwood could exist in any state.
No. It's just that when they shot this, that wasn't the idea. There was no Springwood yet.
Yeah.
He purposely wrote it, and in fact, in early drafts, or even maybe in cut scenes, there were actual things that told you were in California.
Oh, okay.
And then I think they decided to make it ambiguous. And so there's people who say, "Oh God, look at them later on. They're obviously on the canals of Venice, California, and you see palm trees in the when they go to the graveyard." And yeah, I get it. If you're it's a problem thinking about it as Ohio later, as it's established in later movies,
right?
But sometimes you just got to remember this movie wasn't supposed to have sequels, really. In Wes's mind, when he's actually out there shooting it.
What is the name of the Simpsons town? Do you know offhand?
Springfield.
I feel like, is it Springfield? Because again, I think in The Simpsons they chose the name of a town that exists in every state.
It could be
I'm
something
look
like
it up.
that.
Keep
but
going,
so
Springfield.
It is Springfield. Yeah.
This is Springwood.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so Nancy, she's starting to realize that they're all having the dreams and Rod didn't kill Tina, which, we should also talk about what a clever thing it was in the beginning of the movie that they set you up kind of thinking that Tina is going to be the heroine of the movie.
Yeah, because she's the first character you see.
And
that's usually the identifier of the lead. Here we are with one of the most iconic scenes in the movie.
Well, and it also makes it extra scary when right away you kill off horribly too.
Right.
What you think is your lead character in the movie, so this is iconic, a false tub built over a big tank, and you have her literally just sitting her butt over a little piece of wood with a giant hole under her legs, and Jim Doyle is under there with some, scuba stuff.
Well, clearly what you have here in iconography is you have a virginal teen with her legs spread.
Sure.
You have Freddy between the legs. At any point here, Freddy could kill her.
Yeah. It's that idea that he's taunting.
Yeah, he's like the cat with the mouse.
He needs to taunt. That's why he messed with little kids. Now, I also thought it was interesting.
He's like a psychological torturer, really.
It's interesting that if, as
sadistic.
Freddy as a character, when you're saying he's going after the children of the people who
originally murdered him.
But his MO was also, when he was alive, was to kill young children, that it's not young children and it would be so much easier to taunt and mess with in their dreams.
Well, they were young children at that time.
Yeah, I guess. Well, the idea too that from a scene that was cut out is that it was actually like Nancy had a sibling. There's a scene with the mom saying that basically there was an older kid that's who Freddy killed, and I would assume the idea is similar with all these kids, obviously, because they're alive. But Freddy killed kids.
I know I've read in a couple of places, and I'm going to be very careful of what I say here because we're on YouTube. But I think originally Wes Craven wanted to go even darker with Freddy and what Freddy was. And when it comes to kids, I'm sure you can all imagine what I'm getting at here, and that he either was instructed to or chose to, or a combination of both, to tone that into child murder is less intrinsically evil than child blank.
There's a whole story. So in the original script, he was a not
we can't really say certain words on YouTube.
So
obviously.
What happened was in L.A. at the time,
he was like a child predator, we'll say.
He sexually abused kids.
Yeah, there you go. All right.
But there was a real life case that popped out in Los Angeles while they were filming of a real life guy doing that.
Right.
And it was pretty big. And they kind of felt like it was just a little uncouth to sort of play on that tone. So close to what was going on in real life.
What always fascinates me about this series in general is that here's the Evil Dead.
Fun fact, he did this because Raimi put a poster of Hills Have Eyes.
Yep.
Right.
And it continued on.
And it continued, and then he put the Freddy glove in Evil Dead 2.
Evil Dead 2, yeah. It's kind of interesting and funny. I love that. And it also that you see it in the Halloween movies, and that tradition of horror movies paying homage to other horror movies in terms of the media within the world.
Sure. Yeah.
But what were we just talking about? Oh yeah, it's interesting to me that in the spectrum of the entire franchise, that a character that really began in its original incarnation as a child predator, a child murderer, a sexual abuser, all this stuff ends up on cereal boxes in American pop culture.
I think that's a conversation we save for when we get to some of the sequels.
Of course.
How Freddy changes, of course.
But it's so unbelievable.
It was an odd transformation of an IP.
I think it was an organic evolution that Freddy became a pop cultural figure. That transcended even horror.
Yeah.
Even I know even Ronald Reagan, I guess somewhere along the line mentioned Freddy Krueger.
Well, you know what was weird? I asked my dad. I think we talked about this when we were talking about the trailer thing, and I talked about how my introduction was basically sneaking watching this when I was too young because my dad had copied the VHS and we had
Yep.
And I said to him later on, I said, you had to have known I was watching sneaking these movies when you guys were in bed. And he's like, yeah. And I said, why didn't you care I was watching like Nightmare on Elm Street and stuff? And he went, Nightmare on Elm Street. He's like, the first thing he said, he goes, there was no nudity in that.
Yeah, isn't it funny? People are always so afraid of nudity, but violence, whatever.
Yeah, they felt like I don't know exactly how I was. Well, I can tell you, I was 9, I guess, when it came out. This came out. I probably didn't watch it till I was 10 or so, and they felt like, I guess, whatever violence you saw in this, I could handle. It was so over the top, like the fountains of blood and stuff. It was like they maybe thought that's never going to be real. Like that's just not real. So. Whatever,
especially for our youth.
But boobs and butts were gonna.
Well, it's such an identifiably American disconnect.
Right.
That the idea, like, okay, when I grew up, like I've said in other episodes, my parents were very permissive with what I watched. And like, there was a video store in the town I grew up called Video Paradise. Go ahead.
Pause really quick. Yep. Notice fog, dream, fog rolls in.
Oh, there
go
you
ahead.
go. Well, Video Paradise was the video store where I grew up in a little town called Walpole, Massachusetts. And my mom marched me in there when I had to be 12 or 13 and just basically told them I could just watch or rent whatever I wanted. And that's really where a lot of my horror obsession started, and for good or for bad, and which I would say for good. And, the funny thing is when I would want to go see certain R-rated horror movies in the movie theater at that age, what would separate whether I was allowed to go or not was whether there was nudity.
Yeah. It wasn't.
It didn't matter what the violence was.
Yeah, it was.
If it was as violent as the day is long, my parents didn't care. Yeah. But if there was boobs,
I guess it wasn't just nudity. It was the act of sex that was also they were worried about. No, but this is also a weird thing. Like, why is Glenn just popping out from behind a tree?
Because he's really Michael Myers.
Well, of course.
Michael Myers is also behind that.
But
hedge.
yes, if you watch, you'll see the clues that you would be like, huh, what? And
like, yeah, why is my boyfriend over in the bush?
To her, relative to what's going on, this is a dream, and she's trying to figure that out.
You can't evolve her character's intelligence too quickly, or else you diffuse Freddy's power.
Yeah, no, she's figuring it out. This is how she comes up with her plan.
It's actually a very delicate balance when you think about it as a screenwriter, to not declaw your protagonist and overpower your antagonist, but at the same time, if you start empowering your protagonist too much, you destroy the power of your villain.
Think about it. Still, to this point, to the main characters, Freddy is just a dream demon. They don't know he's the child killer.
Oh, yeah, they have no idea what the context of Freddy is
and what the parents did. And we are, like, way into this movie. So you're still thinking, all right, we just got a scary guy. It's just clever. Again, like, there's going to be a reveal. There's still more to this story to keep feeding the audience, to keep them going, whoa, okay.
You can almost see if a lesser director had made this film, you can almost imagine the cheesier version of this movie.
Yeah.
Or the simpler version of this movie. That probably still would have sold and still would have been marketable, but Wes Craven puts all this ambiguity and tonal balance into it that makes it so interesting.
And this great effect, which Wes liked to think was homaged in Terminator 2.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah.
Like, holy shit, that's almost like the T-1000.
He says it in one of the commentary. He goes, I like to think that, there was a nod to this scene in Terminator 2.
It's actually done really well there, too. Well, look at that. Yeah. That's amazing.
The eels at her feet.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And of course, if you've ever seen anything in real life, body bags are not usually transparent.
No.
But
I think they even had a different one at first, and they realized it was just you couldn't tell enough what was going on.
That it has this horrific, like, dreamy quality to it.
And also, like, in the beginning when they see the news clip and they're wheeling the body out and, like, it's clear and the arm falls out, like, that would never happen in reality. And to be shown on the news like a clear clip,
Right.
Heather Langenkamp right there. she cut her foot really
yeah,
bad.
You see that she's
and
sort
you
of
can
like...
see she's right here. She limps up the stairs, holds it up right there at the door.
Oh, yeah. Wow, she starts hopping
She had
on
to
one
get
foot.
stitches or something, the whole bit, or get it taken care of. The stairs here were also another famous
This
point
has to
of
be
contention.
a Jim Doyle effect, the
Well, the
marshmallow
Bisquick
stairs.
is what he said he used.
Oh, wow.
But no, it was a big fight with Bob Shea and Wes. This came from a dream that Bob Shea had, and he wanted in there. Wes really didn't. And so at the end of the day, he kind of gave in because he knew, like, hey, this guy did a lot to get this movie made. I'm going to give it to him. And even let him call action and direct that quick shot as a sort of like, hey, we're all friends here type of thing. Because they had a lot of...
Really quick, here you have Freddie and Nancy rolling around in a bed together. Now, I really, really think that there is something that's specifically placed in this movie.
Robert talks about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That has to do with
He says it's subtle, though. It's not an overt, hey, I just want to, bang you type of thing.
No, I think it's deeper than that.
Yeah.
I think Freddie senses... See, Freddie goes inside, he sees you on the inside. There's something about Nancy he's attracted to.
So now here's another weird thing, right, about the bringing stuff from the dream world in and out. The feathers, right? So, we just saw the feathers. In a second, you're going to see a single feather float by a window, kind of telling you again, I think, this whole thing is a dream.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I like it. The more I'm thinking about it, watching this with that perspective in mind, the more I feel like it makes a lot of sense.
Also, technically, I think I heard or read that when Freddy jumps through that mirror, that was the first use in a movie of a breakaway, like someone jumps through a mirror. Like
it's kind of interesting.
There's a breakaway mirror.
When you think about how much composite and special, kind of interesting, almost verging on what became CGI that's used.
Well, that was practical.
Yeah.
No, that was just him jumping through.
Practical.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, what ultimately the stylization of the effects.
I don't want to not to also just crap on the remake from 2010, but when you look at something like the original version of, see, there's the feather.
Yeah.
The original and she notices it. See, I think that's to her the first clue that something can come out of your dream before she gets to the hat at the.
Unless you're right that this is all a dream.
Yeah, she's seeing it differently because to her she's anyway. But in the 2010 remake, when Freddy kind of does the spandex wall thing over Nancy, it's such an over-the-top CG.
Oh, yes, yeah.
You know what I mean?
And it didn't need to be.
And compared to what they did in this movie, and that's.
Yeah. No, I get that. Well, we are going, just to let you guys know, we are ultimately going to cover the 2010 Platinum Dunes, Nightmare on Elm Street reboot. We're going to do them all. We're going through all these movies for season 2, so we'll talk about that then.
And a lot of this, the rope or the sheet going around Rod's neck is reverse photography.
Yeah, I was just figuring that's what I was going to guess.
Or just like in here, you can kind of almost see the wire sticking out for a second there.
And also, it looks like he might have hickeys.
But it holds up,
I'm just noticing.
Well, you know what? The first time they shot this, where they strung him up, it broke.
So maybe it was just from the first take.
I think that he might have got a little bit of like they almost hung him.
Yeah, that's probably more likely than hickeys. But I mean, he's a handsome actor.
But also,
in the movie. He probably was getting hickeys.
He was all messed up on drugs right here.
Oh, that's right. That's right. This is the jail cell scene. Right.
He's saying for all this stuff, he mainly when he was talking to Nancy and like crying and all that. But
you know what?
They could have shot it all on the same day. Who knows?
As somebody in this world that has had struggles with substances, I will say I can see it on his face.
Yeah.
There's a particular pallor that you get when you're on opiates, and I've had a lot of struggles with that in my life, and I know that look. I can see it in video of myself from years ago.
Well, and he talks about that in some of the newer interviews that he kind of hates seeing.
Yeah, well,
scene
of course,
because
you feel
he can see how shitty his life was at the time.
You feel
he
rotten
says.
about yourself.
Yeah.
I'm clean and sober now, by the way, for the most part. I mean, I
don't let him out of the basement, and we just feed him water and bread.
Yeah,
He's basically in jail in my house.
I live here in the basement.
I tell him Freddy's going to get him.
I get my daily water and bread, and I love it, actually. It's a very simple life. I live like a pioneer.
This was, I believe, like the first day of filming, and another one of the scenes where you get lots of palm trees throughout, kind of taken out of the Ohio thing. But I also think a lot of the cars have California license plates.
And to me, I'm never distracted by things like that. That never does it. That never bothers me. It never takes me out of a movie. I assume that most movies are probably filmed, at least in this era, were filmed in California because it was cheaper, and they got tax incentives to do these movies.
Well, it's funny because they were based out of New York, like Robert Shea and Wes,
right?
And they were basically told, like, "Hey, man, you guys, if you're gonna make a movie, you're really gonna do it. You got to go out west. You just got to go do it." And they did, but there's so many. Look at these palm trees. It's, there's no way this is Ohio. But anyway,
can I just talk a couple minutes about some of the financial information about this movie?
Sure,
kind of interesting.
Of course.
Again, like I mentioned earlier, this film was made for about $1.1 million. I personally can't imagine that a tremendous amount of money was spent on the marketing of this film at the time. So I would say let's say $2 million all in.
Well, I mean, luckily New Line was themselves a basically marketing company for movies before
that's exactly
making this. So luckily they had a lot of the in-house, people and whatnot. I mean, in fact, a lot of the guys who went on to have bigger roles on Elm Street 2 were guys who were like just cutting trailers or, writing stupid scripts for New Line when they were just doing, small movie promoting.
Right.
Katja is the name, one of the names of one of Bob Shea's daughters, I believe.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
But I was going to say, anyway, so the movie made, let's say, with marketing, that's Charles Fleischer, of course, who became Roger Rabbit most famously.
And fun fact, the nurse is Mimi Craven. At the time, it was Wes Craven's wife.
Wait, the nurse here?
Yeah.
Oh, my God, that's interesting,
she became his ex-wife, but at the time, it was his wife.
Before I continue with the boring financial information,
sorry,
I just have to say, Heather Langenkamp, what a beautiful,
I had such a crush on her when I was young and watching these movies, for sure.
I know this sounds weird, but I love her eyebrows. She has beautiful eyebrows, and she has beautiful blue eyes, and she feels actually like a teenager you'd walk by in real life.
Yeah, exactly. She doesn't feel like she's made out of Hollywood.
She's so relatable. She has that at one side angelic face, on the other side you can see there's a darkness in her, which all the best final girls have, that dichotomy. Mm-hmm. And I love that Heather Langenkamp has never distanced herself from her roots as Nancy Thompson in A Nightmare on Elm Street and A Nightmare on Elm Street 3 and Wes Craven's New Nightmare. I'm always so glad that she didn't want to get away from that and separate herself, that she's always been so proud to have been part of this franchise and that she's so identified with this franchise. She's a fan favorite and for good reason.
And what I think also makes her successful here, she's talked about, like, going into this movie, both her and Amanda Weiss, who plays Tina.
Yeah.
Like, they hadn't really seen horror movies. They think they each named like one but they hadn't seen Halloween.
Oh, at the time that they made this?
They didn't know all the tropes and all the stuff, the baggage that kind of goes with it. They kind of, so I think that's what makes it work. There's nothing preconceived in their head of what they need to do to be in a horror movie. They were new young actresses who just were eager to work and act. You know what I mean?
Something, it just occurred to me with Ronnie Blakely's character of Nancy's mother that's really interesting, and it's subtle. Every time you see her, you're going to notice she's either got alcohol in her hand and vice, because she's hiding this horrifically traumatic secret.
Yeah.
That was
it's clearly eating at her.
Exactly. And I like that instead of pushing that into the exposition somehow, Wes Craven directs it with these types of little subliminal hints.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But anyway, really quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
The movie opened, its opening weekend, it made $1.2 million, which is more than its entire budget.
Yeah, it made it back its first weekend. I mean, its budget back.
In the United States, it made $25 million and $57 million worldwide, which for 1984 and for a genre film, that's spectacular.
It was huge. I mean, they were hoping to just make their money back and allow them to basically pay their bills and be able to and have a little clout to go on and do something else. And then it ended up being way more than that. That's why
I love that with the streak of gray hair.
What a nice
appears,
little nod,
And it becomes like indelible part of her character going forward. I love it.
And now the hat comes back, another big revelation for Nancy that she can pull things out of her dreams.
Freddie must have been pissed to lose his hat.
And now the mom is starting to realize, I think I might have to tell her. You know what I mean? It's like this is getting, she's starting to believe the story. You know what I mean?
So does Freddie just make another dream hat for himself? Does a new?
I don't know. Does he?
The way in a cartoon. Sometimes I think about cartoons in dreams in a very similar way.
Does he really have it for the rest of the movie? Are we sure?
We're gonna have to look.
So here's a couple of weird things. Now, if you watch going full, or no, I guess it hasn't happened yet. But there was a scene cut out in Glenn's death where one of the cops finds one of Freddy's finger knives. Has come off the glove. And if you watch the rest of the movie, he's missing one of his knives.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's the index finger.
Well, see, that's cool. That's interesting.
And now if you also look, and it's not obvious in the movie, but there's a lot of great photos of the making of and behind the scenes. Did you realize that the original, at least just for this movie, mask for Freddy actually had tufts of hair that on the back, on the back of his head is long. They're like long blonde pieces of hair. And there's a few shots or photos I've seen, and it's in Nancy's house where they're kind of prepping Freddy, and it's like profile right from the side, and you can clearly see the hair in the mask.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah, it's just it doesn't really read in the
also
movie.
One of his ears is
a lot more
black.
Yeah,
and is almost falling off.
The original mask, I bumped the mic. In the original mask, they actually had his real ear was underneath, totally underneath. That's a completely fake ear over it. And then they changed that as the movies went on. I think at his request.
I really want to pay attention whether Freddy continues to have his hat. I don't remember if he does or doesn't. But
well,
the reason I brought up cartoons,
fire, he's not wearing it.
Do you know when in a cartoon like Wile E. Coyote opens the box and blows up, and his face is black, and then 2 seconds later he's back to normal.
Sure.
Like they can just rebuild themselves.
Yeah. Well, he cuts his fingers off for Tina.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what I'm wondering
Can
in
he
the
make a
dream
hat?
logic, his hat just immediately pops back on his head in the dream world.
Right.
I know it's a stupid detail to be obsessing about, but there you go.
And that hat. Of course, I'm blanking right now, but it was. It's just.
It's not really a fedora.
No, but it's a famous. It was like based on an Italian. Gangster out was it or a famous actor or like a Frank Sinatra or Al Capone. It's like the company that made it. It was a certain edition hat. It was like the Frank Sinatra hat or something like that. I forget, but.
It just occurred to me she slammed that bottle down. It smashes, and the mother's in like bare feet.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Yeah. There's a few different versions of that scene which are kind of interesting to watch. The different ways they had them play it out. In this here, obviously, we are not in Ohio, but
I love how disconnected from the horrors that Glenn Lance really is. He's just living it up. He's just going through life. Everybody's dying around him, and he's got his fast food. He could care less. His girlfriend suddenly got gray hair and is in a frantic state.
It's the old you eat when you're freaked out, right?
He doesn't look too freaked out to me.
And interestingly, too, filmmaking, when they cut here to the close-ups, they are now they film the close-ups on the roof of the studio, the lot where they were filming.
Wow, that's interesting too.
And then the wide shots are here in Venice, California, the canals, the famous Venice canals.
Back when fast food came in styrofoam containers. I actually remember that from my youth.
Now see the mountains in the background that are not there in the wide, but anyway, small filmmaking stuff.
Kind of reminds me of when we were just out in Pasadena.
Right, yeah.
And everywhere you look are these mountains. It's like got this beautiful kind of vista feeling there. Just looks like California.
And going back to some of the money stuff, they had a lot of problems where they would get some investors, and then the investors would pull out. There was a famous story, where they couldn't pay the crew for like a week, and had to beg them to just keep working and and trust them that they would get the money, and they did. And what you really got to talk about is there was a female producer on the movie who was like Bob Shaye's like right hand, woman, and her name was Sarah Reicher, and I had a lot to do, I think, with getting, financially keeping this movie sort of afloat, and kind of and keeping it all together, because there was so many different deals going on, and I think she was a big powerhouse at New Line, and she was famously pregnant during the movie, and talks about basically like when they couldn't pay the crew, she had to give a big speech like, please stay on board and trust us, and no one was willing to say no to a pregnant lady. She thinks it helped them all stay, that she was pregnant, and then later when their music supervisor like up and stole the money that they had given him to pay Charles Bernstein for the music. Oh wow! And the
music is so freaking good. It's so iconic.
And they were basically almost paying him nothing to begin with, but they basically had to go to him also and say like, "Trust us, you're gonna get paid, but please give us the music for this movie," right?
I'm so glad you brought up the music.
Yeah,
because
you got to.
When you comes to like the Halloween franchise or even the Friday the 13th franchise, the music is so well known. The Nightmare on Elm Street, especially in this movie, the themes, the music, it's so well done.
It is.
It's so catchy. I love its tone. It really puts you in the exact frame of mind that Wes Craven wants you to be in, and it really is sort of the soul of the movie. And what was the name of the composer?
Charles Bernstein.
Yeah, well, a beautiful job.
He did it all himself with synths. Even the voices you're hearing are him singing falsetto through like guitar pedals.
Wow.
And it was Heather Langenkamp's boyfriend at the time who wrote the Freddy...
The nursery rhyme.
Well, yeah, not the lyrics, but the melody.
Oh, wow.
Wes Craven wrote the lyrics. Heather Langenkamp's boyfriend came up with that melody, and Charles Bernstein, just said, hey, it was great. He has this attitude of you need to just serve the film. Right. It's not about egos or what I want to do. And it was great, and somebody else had done it, who cares? And he used it. And it's beautifully done, and it's unique. It's I don't know, it sticks in your head, the piano notes.
I wanted to say too that the scene that we saw on the bridge there with Nancy and Glenn. Nancy's holding that little book of booby traps. What that immediately reminded me of when I was rewatching this for this was, remember in our childhood, there was a mail order book that was very controversial that you could get, really anyone didn't. You could be a kid and get this book. Do you remember the Anarchist Cookbook?
Oh, God, yeah.
In that, the Anarchist Cookbook would literally tell you how to make all these implements like explosives, booby traps.
Well, her book was more from, at the time, what was a new thing of survivalists.
Right.
Starting this, like, these
like
ideas.
preppers.
Yes, exactly. It was the beginning of that whole movement and everything.
Yeah, it just reminded me of the old Anarchist Cookbook from the 80s.
Even also back to money stuff, they had so much problems with money that there was a point when they had their final cut of the movie, and the company that had the negative, that processed the negative, held it on them because they hadn't been paid, and they said, you're not getting your movie until we get paid.
Yeah, back in those days, I think that used to happen a lot.
Right, and so it's
portrayed very famously in the Paul Thomas Anderson movie Boogie Nights.
Right.
When they're all coked out, Mark Wahlberg and John C. Reilly, and they can't get their masters back because they owe.
So
another one of the most famous moments, one of the most famous practical effects, certainly coming up.
Oh, with Glenn, yes, and the phone.
With the phone,
the phone. And another weird Wes Craven fact is he was such a hoarder of all the things from his movies. Like he had all these phones and all their outfits.
He kept them?
He kept everything.
That is funny.
He said they were going to throw out all the wardrobe and everything, and he kept all the practical little things that were around. And then what was great is he got to pull them all back out when he made New Nightmare, Wes Craven's New Nightmare, when they had to you know what I mean, set scenes again, like they were back in the original and all that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So he still had all the same, things.
Something I found kind of weird and interesting is earlier in the movie you see Nancy in a football jersey, but it's the number 11.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look, Glenn's number seems to be 10.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah, he's wearing it right now. You think she would be wearing his number or his jersey.
Yeah.
But
Look at
apparently,
the big
in
Nancy
the old
painting.
half shirt,
Oh, yeah,
I
that's
actually
weird.
remember going to school in like 7th grade wearing a half
you?
shirt. Oh yeah, everybody did. Everyone. I mean, the cool kids did, and I certainly wasn't one of those, but I think I tried to be.
Yeah.
And I remember going to school, and I think it was a Van Halen T-shirt that I cut into a half shirt. The problem was I cut it way too high. It was at like nipple height, and it looked so bizarre. And even weirder is I wore it underneath another shirt, so my parents wouldn't notice. And then I changed out of it, and I think after I got 2 or 3 bizarre looks in the hallway in my 8th grade class, I decided to quickly put my other shirt back on. I also once went to school when I was really young, and I had my pajamas on underneath my clothes.
Okay.
In gym class, I took off my clothes, and I was wearing pajamas.
Anyway, so I also want to talk about another
times.
major influence for the movie on Wes was when he was a college professor. One of the groups of students he had made a film that was parodying horror movies that were popular at the time, and they filmed it on this popular street by the college, Elm Street. And he talks about how that was also an influence for him.
Was
their
yeah, I
film,
remember reading something about that. Yep.
where they were kind of ripping apart sort of the tropes of horror movies. Now, we should also talk about famous...
Wait, did the tongue already happen, Freddy's tongue?
No, I think it's
See, I thought
it's
it was going
about
to be in that scene.
It's just
Sorry.
about to.
Yeah,
There's a little back and forth
I misidentified
with the
when that
bedroom
effect
scenes.
happens.
Because you have to have the dad's going to get mad in a minute and slam down the phone.
Yep.
I totally lost my train of thought now about the kids.
That's my fault.
I know you did
blew
it.
it. I do that. I derailed your train. Well, throw a fun fact in, and we'll get right back on board.
Well, also making this, we talked about how Craven was friends with Sean. Is it Sean?
Sean S. Cunningham. Friday the 13th director.
When they were making Friday the 13th, Wes actually directed a few second unit stuff for him. And then when they were making this and needed to kind of catch up on time and everything, he had Sean Cunningham come in and was also directing second unit stuff during the filming of this movie.
The Mr. Coffee, directly from the L.A. Times article.
Yeah.
And also, what was the one you were just saying? We're having a hard time with these trains
the
today.
Craven in Cunningham, Friday the 13th.
Well, they made a movie together, of course, Last House on the Left.
Right,
One of the most
they were
disturbing,
good friends.
one of the original rape revenge movies that was ever made. And what was really interesting about it is the main bad guy of that film was called Krug. Or almost like Kruger. Like Krug.
Yeah.
So he almost was like this duplicitous use of that character name in a villain sense.
Yeah. I knew I was going to talk about. So also Glenn's parents, there were some cut scenes that imply that they were also in on the murder of Freddy.
Oh, I think all of these
any kid that's being killed,
parents,
right?
Exactly.
But it's a little more clearer that there was a scene between this kid's dad and John Saxon that they all clearly knew each other a little more from the past.
And the thing is, in the 2010 remake, they start the movie right off with that.
Right.
It's not held as like a piece of lore that's kind of revealed to the audience, because by the time of the remake, it was so much in the consciousness, in the DNA of these stories of these films, that they just start the whole reboot with that. With that whole scene.
Also, in a second, when we go back to Glenn, if you listen really carefully, when it's the TV, I believe, not the radio station on the headphones, but when you listen to the guy signing off, the letters of the station are KRGR.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty interesting, too.
Yeah, little background thing there.
This is where the phone happens, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And, there was also supposed to, and this is the rotating room again.
Can I point something out really quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
You guys know, if you've listened before, I like pointing out weird things in the set design. If you look, Glenn, who is about to die, if you look what's sitting on the edge of his bed, is a vulture, which is emblematic of death.
Yeah.
Because vultures are scavengers that eat dead things. So watch when you see his bed and look at the strange stuffed animal that's propped up on the bedpost. It is a vulture.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of a sly joke that's foreshadowing his death is about to happen. He's also seeming to be wearing like a Masonic symbol on his necklace, the father.
Yeah, no, I just noticed that too. So where
it's a strange, like almost like a Masonic, triangle. I hope they show that stuffed animal again. If not, pause this and rewind the movie.
They will. The room is the rotating room again, and if you watch though, the blood when it hits the ceiling, they didn't anticipate the weight, and the room starts to go a little out of control. So if you do notice, the blood starts to go to one side. Even the sheets was tilted because the room started going to one side.
Oh my God, you're right.
The blood actually poured out the window and started getting the whole cast and crew. Everybody was covered in blood. The blood also hit the lamp or the light that's on the top of the ceiling was still electrified.
Oh,
and
Jesus.
Guys on the crew that were above that got zapped a little bit, and it was this whole like big chaotic like moment, right? And it filmed great and all that, but there's a famous quote that Wes Craven, walked away from that moment all covered in blood, and it went, when this movie is fucked, but that's the most fun I've had in a long time.
Right.
I
love that weird little picture of Glenn that she has hanging up. He's like in this cool heroic pose on the wall.
So this also goes back to my theory and the talk of like, he's manipulating the real world, but he's not, because it's a dream. You know what I mean? Because if he could make if he could just make his mouth come out of a phone in the real world or do any of this stuff, then he would just kill them. He wouldn't have to wait for dreams, and he could just kill.
Yeah.
You know
right.
what I'm saying?
I see exactly what you're saying. Yeah, that does make sense. And now the mother has essentially set a death trap for her own daughter.
Yeah, she has screwed Nancy's plan, her whole plan up.
She really likes that
basically
specific,
killed Glenn.
She likes that specific brand of vodka. And like a lot of alcoholics, I think it's interesting the way she has the bottles hidden all around the house.
All over, ready to go at all times.
Now, let's see if they show the vulture here. Let's see if you see it in the
You'll
next
definitely
shot.
must see it in the wide shot, if not. Yeah.
See it? There it is. And it's wearing a necktie.
Is that a vulture?
I want to say that's a vulture. I'm hoping it's a vulture, or else my damn thing doesn't make sense. My whole theory makes no sense.
Now, this whole thing was also shot a couple different ways. There was a version.
Well, wouldn't that TV crush Johnny Depp because that fell in after him?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm sure they took that into account. He's probably going off to the side.
Oh, look at that. That is absolutely
now, if you keep
awesome.
watching, you'll start to see eventually things start going sideways because the room is basically out of control. You even watch the sheet behind the blood. It'll start tilting to the side in a minute.
This is a perfect example that sort of proves the point that you're making.
Yeah, like
How is the mother seeing this?
Well, it's supposed to be that he is getting killed, and that's just like his blood. See everything going sideways? I guess.
Okay, so what would the mother be seeing?
No. She is seeing. I think the idea that is, if that's the real world, she would see. It's just the same way Rod had blood all over the room.
Okay, but wait. I think that
it's a lot of blood, but it's supposed to be just Johnny Depp's body's
that scene could
liquefied blood
possibly be used as evidence to support that theory that everything's a dream.
It's so weird and over the top.
In a directorial sense, what I would have done if you would be to switch the perspective. The minute the mother walks in, she's screaming at seeing Johnny Depp's dead body. But what they depict in the film is that she's seeing
the effects
when
of
the
Freddy.
camera pulls around is she's seeing the river of blood.
World,
So what I think the film is
clearly,
suggesting...
look at this. The cops, everybody is seeing a river of blood here.
But they're not seeing it shooting up out of the bed.
But they're seeing the effects of it.
In a quasi-supernatural
there
way.
There wouldn't be this much blood if that didn't happen. That's why they're talking about the guys puking, and there's blood everywhere, and there's...
I got to think about that.
But anyway, they did shoot it at one point where when the mother walks in, you see a skeleton come shooting up out of the bed. with the blood.
Oh my God.
There's also,
that would have been a cool little exclamation point.
I also saw a deleted scene where you see actually Johnny Depp on like a riser being shot up through the bed. Like his body, blood-covered body just coming up through the bed. But in the end, they went with just blood.
I'm really stuck on the fact that when they show the mother seeing the blood
because
shooting up.
It is different. So think about it. When Rod sees Tina, there's nothing that happens there that seems dreamlike. I mean, he saw her body.
So
but
what
think
you're
about
saying
it.
is, did Rod see Tina floating across the ceiling?
He just doesn't see Freddy.
Okay, but how wouldn't he see that as something that's almost supernatural?
Yeah. That's what he was saying. He goes like, there was somebody in the room with us.
So he's seeing Tina's dream.
He's seeing the effects of it. He can't see Freddy, though.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, see, because
dicey.
it's all a dream. It's all a dream.
Dicey.
That's what I'm saying.
The only way to explain it is that it's all a dream.
She says it at the very end of the movie. You're going to see it.
You know what? You're absolutely right.
She says, I get it now. This whole thing is a dream. Not just when I am in my dreams. The whole thing. And that's why she says, I want my mom and my friends back. And that's, boom. And then she's awake. And with her mom and her friends. But, Bob Shaye's twist to it all kind of takes that away.
Here she is MacGyvering a booby trap together.
Yeah, again, very different from the typical final girl who just survives the attack and fights back, in a natural way. Like, Nancy is planning, setting traps, thinking about how this is all going to work. That doesn't usually happen. And, that's the other thing when I lost my train of thought.
Yeah.
We should talk about how famously when Wes Craven, after he made Swamp Thing, which came out right before this, his daughter says to him, why do you always make the girls fall down in the movies when they run? We don't do that. Girls don't do that.
Okay, yep.
And that's when he realized...
Which is such a trope.
Yeah, he goes, you're right. And that's why he went out of his way to show a strong-willed, thinking, fighting bat,
right?
Girl for his daughter. This was sort of all for his daughter to make Nancy this way.
I wanted to mention one of the lesser, I guess what is historically considered one of Wes Craven's lesser respected films that I actually grew up really, really loving is called Deadly Friend. Do you remember that with Christy Swanson? And the story, and I used to have such a crush on the character from that.
Wait a minute.
The kid, he has the girlfriend dies,
yes.
He's building a robot.
Yes, I did.
And then he builds the dead girl, he makes her a robot.
I don't think I ever realized till right now that was Wes Craven. I haven't seen that since we were kids.
Yeah, Deadly Friend. And it has that famous scene, Anne Ramsey from the Goonies. She was in Throw Mama from the train.
Yes.
And Christy Swanson whips the basketball in her head at her and it blows up her head. Well, I had such a crush when I was young on the dead version of Christy Swanson.
Oh my God.
What does that tell you about me?
And so this is...
A lot of revelations
I know, huh?
in this
I'm just going to move
past...
past...
A lot of psychological revelations about me. This is a deep episode.
We'll get you on the couch later.
You guys are getting a lot on this one.
So this is, the moment where Nancy becomes the parent, and she's putting her mom to bed.
Yeah, it's the role reversal is happening.
She's found her strength. She knows what she's got to do. In her world, is the... so what's interesting about Nancy is... she's sort of our quote-unquote hero, but she's actually very unsuccessful. She doesn't save any of her friends. She tries, and after Tina to Rod, she tries to get to Johnny Depp. She doesn't, and really in the end, she's not even really that successful in saving herself. But we'll get down there later. Even the kids, right? In Nightmare 3, a lot of them die.
Yep.
Before they get to the last girl. So, she's a little bit of this tragic. Like, she understands Freddy, and she's his sort of biggest nemesis, or his, the other side of the coin, right? The Loomis in this story, in a weird way. The person who but she's not very successful at what she's trying to do.
Well, here's the thing.
Besides keep herself alive.
In a mythological sense, what Nancy is what's called a Cassandra character. And what Cassandra is in a mythological sense is she is constantly warning everybody about what's happening, but her curse is that nobody will listen to her.
And it goes back to the idea Wes wanted in this movie of what do kids do when their parents won't believe their fantastical stories, even though they're real?
Yep.
You know?
There is a horror to knowing a truth that is a threat to those around you, but nobody will believe you.
But it also it empowers the character usually. You know what I mean?
Of course.
They know that they have to take on this responsibility of going against this character because they're the only ones who get it.
It evolves their self-actualization as a character and evolves a maturation, because when other people won't listen and other people won't help you, you have to take your fate into your own hands.
I also wondered, was she coming down here just to check or to literally get the glove? I think
she was trying to get the glove.
Yeah, to have herself a weapon against Freddy.
And here's the thing I was thinking when I was rewatching this. I would have had her get the glove and wear the glove.
Yeah.
Because what it also suggests is that Freddy has actually won.
Right.
That Freddy has fully corrupted Nancy's innocence and has turned her into a mirror image of himself.
She turned to the dark side.
And maybe that's why Wes Craven doesn't allow her to get her hands on the glove.
Let's face it, Wes wanted. He really wanted to end with the good, happy ending. He just wanted Nancy to actually just be the hero and defeat Freddy, and have her mom and friends, an idealized version of her mom too, and friends back. So,
am I the sick one for wishing that the happy ending would have been that Freddy and Nancy end up together with their cool matching gloves?
Just her constantly
Maybe
stopping
again,
them from killing kids. Now, Freddy. What did we talk about? No.
I just sort of wish that would happen, because I sort of like this love story, this psychosexual love story that is in the subtext between Freddy and Nancy. I love, and I was going to say, if you look at the marketing of some of the other movies, even this one, they're posed together in a romantic pose in some of the marketing.
I was just going to say though, I do think there's a fair amount of that effect isn't necessarily in the writing, and more of the what Robert and Heather developed.
Right,
as actors.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right.
And they've talked about that, how they've talked together, how to their approach when they wanted them to feel like these classic Greek archetypal characters.
I totally agree with that.
That sort of.
Yep.
As
a matter of fact, hold on, I'm going to dig this out because this is important to me. I want to get this out there. Where is it here? I got it in my notes somewhere here.
And we're back in the same Lincoln Heights jail for all this stuff.
There is a really excellent article. If you're interested in reading a great article that really breaks down a lot of the mythological subtextual material in A Nightmare on Elm Street, look up on Google Stephan Hoda, Stephan Hoda. He wrote a really cool article I used in my research that kind of breaks down all these mythological iconography that's in A Nightmare on Elm Street. It's really interesting.
See, I think right there she's in Freddy's little lair. We just don't get the other close-ups.
It's all sort of out of focus and fuzzy.
I do think there was more to it. There's this is one of those movies. There are a lot of not only cut scenes and deleted stuff, but like alternate versions. Like they played around in a few different places with different ways of playing things. And there was that great photo you posted on the Instagram page of Freddy wearing like the cabbie hat.
One of the original look. Yeah.
And Robert talks about how at the end of the day he Wes just kind of question sort of that whether he should stick with the fedora that from his childhood memory, and that they kind of, he said like, no, Wes, you got to go with your gut, stick with with what you think, and he's so happy he went with the fedora.
Just in case any of you are out there wondering, we do have a Haddonfield Radio Instagram page you can check out. If you go on Instagram, just look up hashtag Haddonfield Radio or Haddonfield _ radio, and you'll find us.
By the way, no hat.
No hat!
Yeah. Now, there was also a deleted scene where Heather was supposed to have Nancy was supposed to have a lot longer fall. She was photographed against a blue screen where you see her like way over the city, sort of falling much longer.
Oh, wow.
Again, to try to trick you into that idea that we're in a dream world. But see, yeah, she pulled him out. And if you notice, he's missing a blade. He's missing the hat.
He's missing the hat. There you go. My cartoon logic theory has gone right out the window. Oh, well.
I'm wondering about, and also the hair tufts thing, if it was an idea that was scrapped maybe during the filming, because sometimes it sure looks like it's not there. But
right.
But I clearly,
in that last shot, I don't think it was there.
Yeah, I was going to say, but it's also very dark.
Right.
This movie was filmed, in filming terms, like on the edge of, barely being able to expose the film. Yeah.
The other thing is Freddy's makeup really kind of drastically changed, even starting with the next movie. And what turned into went to Kevin Yeager, and then on and on and on.
And Kevin totally went in a different approach from the sort of I don't know, pizza, the cheese
the thing is, David Miller.
He couldn't figure it out.
The story goes in the lore that David Miller was trying to decide how to design Freddy Krueger's look, and he was eating a pepperoni pizza, and he looked down at the pizza and said, "Now I know what I want to do," and designed it. And that was what his inspiration came from. That's the lore that you read out there.
And then who's the guy for part 2?
Kevin Yeager.
So Kevin Yeager, I guess, had some trouble kind of exactly duplicating what he did, and he had asked him. And there's I think a myth too that they are enemies or they don't get along, but that's not true at all. And he tried to help him and all that, but eventually Kevin just said, "Look, I got to do my own sort of approach here."
We'll get there when we get there, but the Nightmare 2 makeup is actually my all-time favorite Freddy look.
Interesting.
Yeah, I love his look in Nightmare 2.
It's weird here in this movie. It changes. It's never shot quite as clear as you see him in other movies.
Well, yeah, you notice this movie they really obscure the makeup a lot in shadow.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's because they felt unsure about the kind of the believability of the prosthetics, or it's just done out of that noirish style. I don't know.
Think about how clever it is too that Nancy sets a trap to set Freddy back on fire.
Well, think about something.
Right.
Hold on. When Nancy fell asleep previous to this, Freddy was leading her through to him with breadcrumbs. All right, like Glenn's headphones. Yeah. Nancy is doing the mirror of this now in leading Freddy through her traps. Yeah. You see what I'm saying?
And we got to talk about this. At the time, this was the longest fire film stunt performed. The guy who did it, he was supposed to just go to the stairs and stop. And then he goes up the stairs. And then he falls back down the stairs. And now he tries to get up again. He was not supposed to keep doing all this. Right there, when he falls down, that was his signal for them to put him out. That guy is a well-known, I can't think, is Tony something, I believe. And he, is a well-known fire stunt performer. But that particular, he even won an award, I think, that year for this scene of some sort. It was a big deal what he did right there in that scene.
What's interesting is back in these days, if you actually wanted a particular stunt performer who was really known for full body burns, you went to Kane Hodder. And he actually ended up extremely badly burned and he still has these burns burn scars you can see. So I'm almost surprised it wasn't him.
He read for the part before they realized kind of exactly what they wanted, and it was also after they made the decision okay, we can't do the stuntman route like Halloween and Friday the 13th had done. We need an actual actor performer under here for Freddy.
Right.
But there was a time where he said he went in and read before Wes knew. He goes, I wouldn't have been right, knowing, because I would love to try to do it, but it would have been a totally different Freddy. And again, the dad is literally interacting with Freddy right there. So if this is the real world, which we know in a second. Even now, it's not.
Look at that puppet is so.
I know.
So
isn't it weird how this
he's
movie?
seeing this.
Yeah, I mean, he put a blanket on.
So he's seeing a supernatural moment of Tina sinking into a glowing
Watch the
bed.
way he closes the door when the cop comes. He knows, like, this is some weird shit, and whoa, this guy can't see this. But ultimately, this is all a dream too. But think about it too. The dad also doesn't say a word here. No acknowledgement of "you were right, baby."
Oh my
or
God.
yes. Look at he just
really
runs.
Freaking me out. Trying
he
to figure
closes
this
the
out.
door. He hugs her, and then she says, "I'll be down in a minute, Dad. Go ahead." But you don't really know what he's thinking.
Right.
You know, he doesn't really verbally acknowledge anything. Obviously, he saw, I guess, something on fire. It looked to me, though, that like he was interacting with Freddy.
It really boggles your mind when you start to think about it.
She's putting it all together right now. So this is the important scene I was talking about. You gotta listen.
That's the second time you see butterflies in relation to Nancy. Once when she opens the medicine cabinet in her bathroom, there's a butterfly kind of just stuck to the inside of the mirror.
Yeah.
And now you have two butterflies there. And butterflies obviously have symbolic meaning. But go ahead, I interrupted you.
No. But, she's realizing here, like, God, there's no real world anymore versus dream world. There's
only Freddy's world.
Like, she's awake to her, and yet he's closing the door, he's killing the mom. So listen, this is the big stuff.
You think you was gonna get away from me?
I know you too well now, Freddy.
Great shots.
I actually...
Listen.
It's too late, Kruger. I know the secret now. This is just
Ready?
a
Right here.
dream. You're not alive. This whole thing is just
Whole thing is just, it's right
Yep,
there.
no, you're right.
It's given to you right there.
I want my mother and friends.
See?
What?
I take back every bit of it.
See, I wonder if Freddy ever actually planned to kill her at all. Or if Freddy just is so...
Maybe he's growing. It's the idea, the more he kills, the more he grows in power, and he can't face Nancy until he's killed the rest. He knows he needs more power for her.
And she opens the door. It's broad daylight.
here we
She's
are.
in this clean look.
So-
She's got the hair pulled back.
But there is a lot of fog.
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's why I say maybe the whole thing, even this, like, it's still all
this
the
has that
dream.
dream feel
The
to
dream of a filmmaker. Now, they are acknowledging the fog.
And look at the mother in white.
Which I think is done to mess with you. Because it's the first time they're using fog and the characters are aware to say, oh, maybe this is reality and it's just
Right.
foggy.
Yep. Yep.
But he's also doing that to kind of make you go, I don't really know what's going on.
Yep.
But because even when Glenn pulls up, he says, well, this, what about this fog? And she's like, oh, it's sunny. It's going to burn off.
Yeah.
But here, how about this fog? So it's, as subjective a little bit, but I think...
And she can't see the colors on top to know that it's Freddy's
Well, no,
colors.
so here you got to say, okay, well, I mean, to Bob Shea, it's... This, I think, if you're not going to go with Wes's happy ending, the idea is what we just witnessed up until the door opening daylight was a precognitive nightmare that Nancy has, and this is now the nightmare.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's deep.
Because Freddy's still here. We got the girls.
I find it so creepy the way the dummy gets pulled through.
is.
It's such a creepy look.
One of the last things they shot, they did it in one take, and they just kind of needed to get
They
it
sort
done.
of just threw in all the potential endings into one ending.
Yeah, it was a compromise.
Yeah.
They tried to get a little bit of it all without it really definitively going one way or the other.
And I like that he's Robert Englund's credited as Fred Krueger.
Fred Krueger.
He really hadn't become Freddy yet.
No. It's really interesting. And we were, this music is reminding me of another cool story that Dreamweaver, the song Dreamweaver.
Right.
Wes Craven had heard, and the synths in that gave him the tone for the music that he wanted in this movie. And if you go and listen to it, my God, it does. It sounds like it's just music right out of Nightmare on Elm Street. The whole beginning before there's lyrics and stuff.
One of the production assistant type jobs that was in this movie was somebody named Rachel Talalay. And she had been with New Line Cinema from the very beginning, and ultimately she went on to direct Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare.
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of important people in terms of the producing and keeping everything together. It was definitely... I mean, you know, there was a point where Wes Craven's agent was so worried about him getting paid in the beginning that Wes didn't even attend the first table read. The agent said, don't go. I don't think you're going to get paid. Because it was at a time when the financing, they had it, and then it kind of, some of it went away, and it made his agent really nervous. And that goes back to the idea, and this is why he didn't want a part of a lot of the rest, where the Nightmare series really wasn't his. I mean, he wrote and directed that first movie, which makes it sound, you know, he established a lot for this world.
Right.
But it was Bob Shaye's property. It was Bob Shaye owned it all.
I mean,
and he got to call the shots.
New Line Cinema, ultimately, up until the time of The Lord of the Rings, New Line Cinema was usually called the house that Freddy built.
Yeah, it's still, I think it still is a lot. You know, it's amazing what that one movie was able to do for this fledgling, you know, little distribution company. It
changed everything for Robert Shaye. It changed everything for Wes Craven. And Wes Craven, like I said before a couple times, you know, he was already an established horror director. And yet, this put him into a totally different
But this
level.
was hard. You know, he had those 2 films under his belt with Hills Have Eyes and The Last House, and he kind of had this attitude of, oh, you know, and everyone around him was like, hey, you've made it now. You're in. You can do this. So he writes Nightmare. It took like 3 years of shopping around before Bob Shaye and him, you know, made their deal. So it wasn't a slam dunk. A lot of people did not see the potential in this movie, but thank God Wes never lost the faith in it, you know, to keep pushing it. Now, unfortunately, I do think it became the type of situation where he kind of had to sell his soul to get it made, which is to give up a lot more of the rights and control than he would have wanted to on something that kind of all came from his mind, and ultimately why there was, you know, kind of problems going forward after that with him and Bob Shaye.
In many ways, I mean, it's a very personal film for Wes Craven.
Oh, God. It's so personal.
It is so connected to his own fears, his own childhood.
I mean, even a lot of the
consciousness, everything.
The family dynamic in Nancy's family. He came from a divorced household, and so I mean, God, everything. That's what I mean. Nothing is filler.
No.
Right? We were talking about that.
I mean, the movie, it's one of these, like when we covered all the Halloween movies for season 1, some of them, as we're doing these commentaries, feel longer than others. That movie just zipped right by.
There's so much. Well, yeah, it's, again, a classic. There's so much good to talk about.
Yeah.
It's got a great story behind the making of it that, you know, that's what I love. You know, if you don't know the making of it, you could say, hey, Nancy's parents being divorced is a classic trope of movies, whatever, but you learn about Wes and you kind of go, okay, he's doing it for personal reasons, and I like it changes a movie for me. And I know a movie shouldn't be based on knowing how it was made. You should be able to watch it, and
it enhances.
You know, but I love it. You know, as just a fan of filmmaking and these movies that were made in such in my mind, a historic few decades, those 60s,
70s, 80s, 90s. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you know, the films were just made differently, and I love hearing about how they did it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's a great beginning for season 2, and that's why I originally said to Joe, let's consider doing Nightmare on Elm Street next. Just because it's such a fascinating franchise that goes in so many different directions.
It is, yeah. There's a lot to.
And not only that, so many different, well-known, now established filmmakers came out of the Freddy franchise.
Right.
A lot of great writers and directors that all put their own personal stamp. And one thing I will say about Robert Shaye, that to his credit, all throughout the Nightmare franchise, is he really gave the power to the filmmakers in a lot of ways, a lot of substantial ways, to take the Freddy story and mold it in all these different directions and try different things and push Freddy until it came full circle again with Wes.
Right.
Now, of course, it extended beyond that when you have like Freddy versus Jason.
The Freddy TV series, remember that
Freddy's
stuff?
Nightmares.
Oh, man.
I was talking to my mom the other day about I remember getting in trouble when I was a young teenager because I had called the 1-900
the Freddy
Talk
hotline.
to Freddy hotline like 23 times.
Think about if you could have gone to like Wes and Robert Englund and those guys during the making of this movie, and show them that stuff. Like, look what what you've started, and you're gonna show this character at this point of doing phone commercials and TV series. What a metamorphosis of a character. It's crazy.
Well, like I said, Freddy emerged even out of horror and became just a pop cultural icon.
And I think that it's almost easy to want to say that's a bad quality, that he changed from a true dark horror slasher guy to a little more of a pop icon. But I'd say, from just personally, as a kid who grew up in that time and sort of just was with it all as it happened, I loved it.
Yeah,
what I mean? I ate it up.
Nightmare 3 is probably my favorite in the whole franchise.
Right.
And he's at his quippiest best in that movie.
Yep.
And he's got as many one-liners as like Arnold Schwarzenegger in that era.
Yep.
And when we get there, we'll talk about that. But I actually think a lot of that is running parallel purposefully.
Sure.
What you see going on in the action movies, comedies, horror in the 80s, like you just said, like this pop sensibility that sort of permeated a lot of different genres in filmmaking throughout the 80s, certainly.
And some of it, at least, was financially motivated. I'm sure they realized they could sell a bunch of stuff to kids if you could make Freddy, a little more easier to take. But anyway, we'll get there.
Yeah,
this was great. This was
a lot of fun. Joe and I can speak for both of us when I say we just live to come and do these episodes and to watch these movies with you guys. I know for myself, I always picture all you guys in this basement with us when we're watching this movie. I picture all you guys. Spooky Halloween Gal, Diabolic Studios,
Mike Hatfield.
All of you guys. I picture you all right here watching this with us. Everything Scary. I picture all you guys. And so, to us, that's the beauty of it and the fun of it, and that's what it really is meant to be. And I hope you guys have enjoyed it as much as we had enjoyed making it. So, we'll be back next time. Actually, we'll be back next time with episode 5 of our Haddonfield Radio Trailer Park series.
Yep.
We're going to be doing our Cult of Thorn episode, where we will be doing analyzing the trailers and discussing the trailers for Halloween 4, 5, and 6. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be the immediate next episode here on the channel. But we will be back with the Haddonfield Radio series next, of course, with Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge, the Jack Shoulder directed sequel. Very controversial, very divisive film.
A lot to talk about it.
A lot of subtext in that one.
And there'll be some live casts. I think, when this is being recorded, we're going through the holiday season, and I think we're going to be trying to do a few fun live things in between now and New Year's.
Right.
So keep your eyes and ears open for that. And, we're just planning on getting back to it here. We took a little break after season 1, and we plan on giving you guys lots of good stuff
now. So anyway, we just love you. We really, really mean that.
We appreciate it.
When I say that, it's because we mean it. We actually love you, and we actually sincerely appreciate you taking time out of your busy lives to come and watch a movie with us and hang out. So thank you, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, or if you didn't, let us know in the comments section. And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button so we know you're out there and we can let you know when we have new videos to offer you guys. So I guess before we go, is there anything else you want to add?
I just want to say, don't forget, don't fall asleep.
Wow, that's truer words have yet to be spoken. Well, until next time, I'm Christian White.
And I'm Joe Francazio.
And have a very happy Halloween.